don't believe we just asked me.
This flags beside it. I hereby call the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting of Monday, March 19, 2018 to order for the City of Lloydminster. At this time, we'll take a silent moment of personal reflection. As a reminder, all members of council are obligated to declare a conflict of interest or pecuniary interest as per section 133 of the Lloydminster Charter regarding any item on this agenda. Again, I'll remind council members that this meeting is for discussion and information gathering only. All decisions will occur during our regular council meetings. We thank all our presenters for their time. At this time, I'll look for direction from the committee on item number 2, approval of the agenda. Councilor Thorson.
I move that the agenda dated March 19th, 2018 be approved.
Seconded. Councilor Buckingham. Any discussion or comments on the agenda? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 3, the approval of the minutes. I'll let Councilor Buckingham.
The Governance and Priorities Committee meeting dated February 20th, May 2018 be approved.
Seconded. Councilor Thorson. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 4, administration reports. City Manager. The first one up is 4.1.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. Today we'll have Mr. Wayne Shanks presenting on the new building and safety code.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council. The issue today is the adoption of the building and safety codes. We're looking at presenting 4 options for the commission for the committee to consider. Now, just go into a bit of the background here. According to Section 51 of the Lloydminster Charter, Council may by bylaw declare that the National Building Code or all or part of any other code of standards be enforced within the city. The City of Lloydminster is currently following the 2005 National Building Code. Planning and Development has identified a need to update the code that is currently being followed. This code is well behind industry standards, industry norms rather, and practices in municipalities across the country. A comparison of code options are detailed below. Now, the province of Saskatchewan has adopted the National Building Code 2015, which came into force on January 1st, 2018. The National Building Code, the National Energy Code for Buildings 2015, or the NECP 2015, and Section 9.36 of the National Building Code 2015, entitled Energy Efficiency, has been adopted and is coming into force on January 1st, 2019. The Alberta Building Code 2014 has been declared in force May 1st, 2015 in Alberta. The National Energy Code for Buildings 2011 has been declared in force November 1st, 2015. We have received feedback from the Lloydminster Construction Association in the form of a letter that was submitted to the city on November 11th, 2017, which indicated their preference of building code being the National Building Code 2010. This code does not include the 2011 National Energy Code for buildings. So going into the objective, the aim of this briefing is to provide information to council as to options available to the city regarding the adoption of a new building code and to indicate planning development's preference for a new building code. There are 4 options, which I'll list here. The status quo, essentially continuing to follow, the city continues to follow the 2005 National Building Code. However, with this option, it's understood that this code is well behind industry standards in most municipalities throughout Alberta and Saskatchewan. Second option would be to go with the 2010 National Building Code. The City of Lloydminster adopts this version of the National Building Code that is recommended by the Lloydminster Construction Association. This version does not include the 2011 National Energy Codes. Option number 3 would be the 2015 National Building Code. The City of Lloydminster adopts the most current version of the National Building Code. This code is in line with what municipalities in Saskatchewan are currently following, and this version includes the 2011 National Energy Codes. And fourthly, that the city adopted 2014 Alberta Building Code. The City of Lloydminster adopts a different code for the entire city, recognizing the fact that the city straddles a border between Alberta and Saskatchewan. This version includes the 2010-11 National Energy Codes. Of these 4 options, planning and development has a preference. And this preference would be the 2015 National Building Code for a few reasons here as listed. That the existing 2005 National Building Code is outdated and well below current industry standards. Secondly, given the bi-provincial characteristic of the city, it may be more appropriate to adopt the National Building Code as it is not Alberta specific. And thirdly, all Saskatchewan municipalities are currently following the 2015 National Building Code. And so along with this, we will be looking at going forth to council, if we may, to look to get decisions on which code to follow. Subsequent to that, we'll be looking at bringing forward a bylaw, drafting a new bylaw that would align with the new code that the city wishes to follow. And I just want to make one clarification here that the National Energy Code, if it's not clear already, is coming into force throughout Canada, certainly coming into force in Saskatchewan on January 1st to 2019. And that concludes my presentation, Your Worship and Council.
Thank you, Wayne. Start with Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Mayor. 2 quick questions for you. First off, the Lloydminster Construction Association, did they give specific reasons outside of what it looks like is not wanting to go with the National Energy Code for buildings? Is there anything else to their request?
Councilor Buckingham, I recall the letter. Certainly there was talk of the National Energy Codes that would certainly obligate builders to build to a higher standard, a more energy efficient standard. In terms of, I think they were referencing the fact that the City of Lloydminster has a charter that allows the city to adopt any code that they wish to adopt and any version of that code. That's, I believe, the answer to your first question. You have a second one?
Changing the bylaw, in a perfect world for you, you make the decision to go forward. what's a start date then for that bylaw to come into effect if you had it lay out perfectly for you guys?
Thank you, Councillor Buckingham. First of all, as outlined, we need to first decide which code that we're going to adopt. That would be, I would understand, through council resolution. After that decision is made, there would be direction given to prepare the draft bylaw. The draft bylaw would have to go through a public hearing process, as well as 3 readings. So in terms of a timeline, I think we're getting probably closer to the summer to officially adopt the new building code bylaw with the new building code.
Right, so you get to that point, it takes effect when the bylaw passes. Are you looking to align with some things that are starting January 1st of 2019, or how would that look for us?
Well, certainly for the National Energy Code, that will not kick in until January 1st, 2019. As with any addition, well, when the let's say for instance the 2015 National Building Code is the one that is chosen. You're still not going to have the National Energy Codes kick in until January 1st. However, the code itself would be effective as of 3rd reading of the bylaw.
Yeah, I was just curious as to people in the construction trade having time to adopt, adjust, that kind of thing, if that should factor into our timeline decision.
That's correct.
I'd like to ask City Clerk to chime in at this point because he has some information from the charter that may be of interest.
So provisions from Section 51 of the Charter allow you to adopt the National Building Code, another building code, or portions thereof of a building code, or restrict or strike areas of a building code. So council is a very wide latitude in this area. Also, your question about the use of when a bylaw would make an effect, council could, if it felt it was appropriate, pass a bylaw and then give a date that the bylaw comes into force and effect. So you could pass the bylaw and have it come into force and effect on January 1st, 2019, January 1st, 2020, whatever council so chose.
Yeah, and that's what I was looking for. If there's some other codes that are coming into effect on a certain date, can we align that? So.
Absolutely.
So I can also add a little bit of clarity on the letter that's referred to in the Construction Association. I'm looking at a copy here. The concern at the time, back in November of 2017, was before Saskatchewan had made the move, I believe, way to where they are today, because the Construction Association referred to the challenges of being Alberta was at one point, Saskatchewan was at a different point, and there was quite a substantial difference between the 2 building codes. And depending on what code we chose, would certainly be challenging on the Saskatchewan side to be competitive. But I believe that's changed now based on Saskatchewan adopting the 2019 energy codes. This letter of 2017, as things move, things change. And I think that's the understanding I have is at the time, when they were looking at this back in 2017, the Construction Association saw a huge difference. I think that difference has basically come to almost being eliminated due to the codes that each province is looking at doing. Is that correct, Wayne? Is that correct?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe you're correct there. And certainly, yes, at that time that it was questionable whether the 2019 National Energy Code would become part of the 2015 NBC at that time. So you are correct in that regard, Your Worship.
I'll take Councilor Buckingham again and then follow up.
My last one, I promise. So we're 4 months later from the letter. Have we been in contact with the Construction Association since that change? And if not, can we be to clarify to make sure what their position is before we get too deep into this? Because of course, hearing concerns from individuals and groups is important, especially when you're making this kind of a change. So have we had any further correspondence with them since?
Thank you, Councillor Buckingham. There has not been any correspondence since that letter. However, certainly we could make effort to have a meeting with the Construction Association and get their feedback on these options.
Because if what the mayor's saying is it holds true, there's been changes since, so I think it'd be good to clarify their position if those changes have happened since that letter.
I agree with you. I got Councilor Torres and then Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a couple of questions. One is on the National Energy Code, just to be sure I'm clear on that. We can choose to adopt or not adopt that. if we did the Alberta building code, but if we do the national building code, we would have to adopt the energy code, is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Thorson. If we know with the Alberta Building Code, there's the national energy codes which are part of that code. So there is no leeway there. The only leeway, as I mentioned here with the options, is if you go with the 2010 version of the national building code, there are no national energy requirements.
Okay, thank you.
To Executive Manager Stanley.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Just to give you an update, we had a meeting with the Construction Association, or quarterly meeting last week. We gave an update that this was coming to GBC this week. We talked about the recommendations that were coming forward. The Construction Association did express concern around the national or the energy code being implemented on the Saskatchewan side and not implemented on the Alberta side, that there would be a difference in the code being applied in those different provinces. We had told them that we were going to bring these options forward to council, and that council would provide some direction.
Thank you. City Clerk.
Just add some clarity to your question, Councillor. The city is in a very unique and enviable or unenviable, depends on your position, of being able to adopt a portion or a full act. The city has that latitude through the charter. Section 51 gives us a broad range of latitude, and whether we adopt an energy code or don't adopt an energy code, that becomes council's role.
Thank you. A couple other questions. One was, so we've got the 2005 that we're running with right now. I heard a story, someone said we changed that in 2007, 2008, that we adopted the 2005, and up until that point, as I understood, we were running the 1995 building code. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Thorson. I am not aware of that. I don't have any further comment on that.
Okay. So maybe Ken knows, it sounds like.
Councillor Baker. The man of knowledge
My
and
honor,
construction.
That's what I got.
thank you, Your Worship, and thanks, Mr. Shanks. This is a far more complex project than it sounds like, the debate going around this table. I'll question anybody in this room if they read the 2015 National Building Code outside of yourself.
Are you asking me if
I'm asking you, has anybody read the 2015 National Building Code? I'm not being flippant, I'm just telling you what happens. I worked my whole life in the industry. And we're usually 3 or 4 years behind minimum with the building codes, because they bring out these new building codes. I'm not sure why sometimes. And people got to find out if they even work. We had a national fire code we adopted years ago, but our fire trucks weren't high enough to reach the tallest buildings in town. We had quite a debate about that one too. So you got to make sure if the building code, you're going to adopt something, you could meet that building code. And I would suggest that the home builders and the general contractors in the city have never read, or most of them have never read and wouldn't understand what we're even talking about, what we asked them. And I think what you got to have, if you're going to adopt that, if you want to be really a good city council, you would put on a seminar and have them understand what the new things are going to happen to the building code. The other thing is that we say in the 2005 building code, we're well below standards. Who said we're well below standards? Whose standards? Somebody sitting in Ottawa saying you're below standards? I don't buy into that. You got to develop something that works for your community. That's why we have the flexibility. And I totally agree with you. At one time we had the Alberta, they tried having the Alberta Building Code on one side, National Building Code on the other side. Contractors would come to our city, even the local contractor. They didn't know what they were building under. We had buildings, and I know that Don might remember this, they put the fire hydrant threads on a commercial building for the fire hydrant trucks, and it was the wrong side. You know, it was Alberta threads for, believe it or not, that's the difference in the codes. So there's a lot more to this thing it's going on, but I still don't know who's saying it's behind industry standards. If somebody decides it should raise the standard and raise the cost of building homes, raise the cost of building buildings, it never ends. We sit in this council chamber and we talk about affordable housing. And every time we sit at this council chamber, something goes up. The costs go up, and they go up, and they go up. So we either got to quit talking about affordable housing, or have a look at what we're really doing about the cost involved, because many people just can't afford to build a home at the cost they are today. The 2015 building code is probably fine. I personally don't know what that energy code is. I couldn't even comment, but I think I'd like to see a copy of those documents, and I think we should have some dialogue and some people that are experts to talk to our community, because we're here to serve the building trade. They're not here to serve us. And I think that sometimes if it isn't something, somebody's adding more tax, whether it be carbon tax and this and that, and it just keeps driving everything up. So it's not to knock what's happened here, it's to say what's really going on. And I'll bet you, Jonathan works for an engineering firm, I'll bet they've never even read the National Building Code 2015 in their office. Be honest with you, why would they? Because it's never been adopted.
I don't want to get into that, but
No.
they have to do projects outside of our border, which has to follow the 2015 National Building Code.
If they've adopted
So, just outside the city of Lloyd, in Saskatchewan, they're going to have a 2015 building code, so they need to know that if they want to do any projects, they're not directly in Lloydminster. I'm pretty sure they know it. Just throwing it out there, and that would be. I'll let you finish, Ken.
No, but I mean, how often has it been used? And so from the time they bring a code in until they kick it in, you can let it find bugs in it before you start introducing it all over the place. Because there are bugs in these building codes, there's no questions. So I think the idea is correct, but I think we have some work to do on that.
Councilor Johnson.
Just to where I was kind of heading before, and again, this is only for discussion purposes, but if that were true, the assertion that we were using the 1995 building code in 2007 or 2008, and now it's 2018 and we're using the 2005, we're on a trend where we're about 13 years after. And yes, the kinks will be worked out by then, but I imagine that the kinks would be worked out from the 2015 building code. If we were to adopt it in 2019, it would already be 4 years old. 3 years old. Anyway.
Councilor Dutchek.
Yeah, thank you. My biggest question, I guess, is what the difference was between the years and the changes that were in there. And I really believe that the codes are put in place for just general safety and better practices overall. We used to have 2x4 homes, now we have 2x6, so we save energy. Different types of shingles are used, different products are used. Fire retardant materials and the like that go along with it. So are there benefits in there? What I don't gather, I guess, out of this is that what the significant change is. I think what I did here, and I kind of, that meeting where we spoke with the Construction Association, is that recognizing that just west of us they were using different standards, the cost of building a building to the west was higher than to build in the city because we had different standards. And that cost was also more competitive on our side because we didn't have to have all of the energy components in it. And one of the big pieces that they did speak about is that to the larger buildings and sort of shops that had doors, the standard of the doors and insulation factors that had to go in there were significantly higher, raising the price of that building in particular. So if we're looking at the industrial part of our city in particular, that would be the hardest hit part of our city. And the question is, if I'm opening the door every half hour, how thick and what's the relevance of it being R40 versus R20 when your heat is being lost primarily because the door being open. So I think there's, I agree with Councillor Baker, some of these questions need to be expanded a little deeper. The other question, however, is that in spite of us having the option, is it at some point will it be mandatory for everyone in Canada to adopt that safety portion? And I didn't quite hear the answer to that, so maybe someone could clarify that for me.
Thank you, Councillor Diachuk. Certainly a lot of good questions are being raised here. One thing that I think is coming to me loud and clear is that I think we need to get probably the builders together And let's get a little bit more information on what they're looking for. And I think what we need to do is get the experts in the room too, as to the differences between the codes, different codes that we have. One thing I do want to mention is that all of these codes that we have here are safe. They're all safe codes. It's just one code might be considered safer or more energy efficient than the other. So we're talking about 2005 National Building Code as opposed to the 2014 ABC Alberta Building Code, the 2010 National Building Code, and the 2015 National Building Code. So the differences mainly are with the reversions, the subsequent versions of the National Building Code. It includes the National Energy Code. And certainly the cost differentials, as Councillor Gajchuk had mentioned, those certainly are things to keep in mind. One could also look too that over the life of the building, there are savings, cost savings, and certainly upfront costs. I can certainly understand that. Any of the mention here of what we're looking at in terms of different codes and what the differences are, those are differences that, again, that are known through either material that's put up by the Alberta government or the Saskatchewan government as well, and also the federal government as well with the national building codes. Certainly, again, all the codes are safe, but it's just that I think the big part here we're talking about is the national energy codes, which kind of brings that extra cost that we're talking about into the mix. And perhaps for differences in the codes, specific differences, one thing I can say is that when we first brought, the planning and development first brought this forward, we had a seminar for the builders and developers to attend, and at that time we were looking at possibly adopting the 2014 Alberta Building Code. And we we certainly did research into that. I know that the Alberta Building Code has a number of interpretation bulletins, such as stand data reports, that I certainly believe provide good information to the safety codes officers, and could result in some situations, could result in cost-saving measures, because if things are not misinterpreted, you could end up with a cost-saving measure there. One could argue and say, well, could it even be safer? I don't want to go there. But certainly, you could have situations where that safety, perhaps safety codes officer may be of the opinion that I think I met that certain code requirement in a safer manner with the Alberta Building Code. And again, I'm just using the Alberta Building Code as an example. They could say that. So it's kind of open to opinion sometimes as to which is the best code to follow. But, as indicated by our city clerk, we have the choice to follow any code that we wish. However, we could bring forward this to a subsequent seminar and see if we can get more information on it and perhaps bring that information to council.
Yeah, so I didn't get the answer to the second question. So at some point, will it be mandatory for everyone in Canada to follow the, what's that port on energy? That portion on energy?
Well, from what I hear is that all the codes, the Alberta Building Code and the other local codes, I think Manitoba follows another code, I believe, British Columbia. From what I've heard from the Alberta Safety Council is that, or the Safety Codes Council, is that all of these codes could come under the National Building Code. It would be one uniform code throughout the country. And this, from what I understand, from what I've heard, could be as early as 2020.
Okay.
So at that point, everybody would have to follow one code, and the national energy codes would be part of that code.
So the only other element, I guess, is that a builder's ability, or you as an owner of getting that building built, is your ability to get insurance on it compromised in any way if you're using an older set of building codes?
That, unfortunately, Councillor, I don't know the answer to that.
Because I guess we wouldn't have a building code that really sort of hinders in some way, I guess, handicaps people in our community to be able to access insurance or whatever they need to get. So my guess is probably we're able to do that because we've been out of sync and out of stepping behind. But if people at some point aren't up to date and aren't caught up, would there be some sort of a catch perhaps on insurance or whatever it is?
Again, I don't have an answer for that, Councillor.
City Clerk, did you have a comment?
No, it's-
No problem. Councillor Baker.
Your worship, I don't know about this 13-year spread. The city used to work, and I know there's nobody left from the old school that was here in the building department, but about every, like, a 5 code would be in, they'd bring it in 10. And the 2010 code, they'd bring in about 14 or 15. There was about a 4-year span. And the city planners and building inspectors of the past believed it was, give it some time to see if it even works before we jumped into it. And you can check the record somewhere on it. But I don't believe we ever, what you did in 2010, I can't tell you. From 2005, that was adopted, I know that. But what happened in 2010, I wasn't here. And after that, I don't know. But the other thing I want to make a point of, if we have to and you want to adopt the energy code, do it at the same time as you change the building code. Don't have part of it one day and part of it the next day. Because a lot of that energy code ties together. Your heating equipment and your insulation, all this stuff. I don't even know what the energy code is, the one we're talking about. But a lot of it overlaps. You should maybe look at, when, if you do it, do it all at once. So that it
Matches up.
Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
One more question, and really segues a little bit into the community standards piece, but, so when we adopt a new building code, what impact does it have if we want to do it, well, for insurance or anybody else to investigate and say this building doesn't meet codes, you have to tear it down? Does that standard change, or is that piece in there, or is this a place where that legislation, that authority lies? Or is that a question that doesn't belong in this discussion?
Wayne, do you want to take a crack at that?
Thank you, Councillor Nychuk. That is a difficult question for me to answer. I could certainly look into it.
I think that, and again, my experience is pretty limited. If you have a building and the code changes, you're okay until you make a renovation. Councillor Baker, I look to you for some direction on this, but my understanding is once you make an alteration that's governed by the codes, moving a wall may not move, it may not change the code, but it could change the code. But if you change the heating system, as an example, you change the electrical system, then you to get to a point that you have to pull a permit and do those kind of things. That's the code that's going to be applicable to it. So simply having a building today that was built in 1940 and a code that we accept the 2015 building codes as an example, as long as that building, nothing's done in that building still met the code when it was constructed. But once you renovate, once you make that initial capital step, if that's what you want to go to, then the building needs to be brought up to code.
I'm aware of that piece of it. I guess the question I have is if I have a building and it starts to leak, which code, where does it come under, this one, or?
I guess that it would be the building inspector, in a different department, I believe, would likely have something.
But with this code guide that, I guess that's the other part of it. So that's why I'm only asking because I think there's another bylaw later on that talks about community standards, right? And so some of those pieces in there really twigged for me as I was reading and combining these two pieces together. So you have building codes, you have community standards. If we have a home that perhaps is unsafe and the windows are broken, not only the way it looks, but I'm also thinking about safety-wise, those pieces. So what do we draw upon to support that position that this house should be condemned or whatever it is?
We're mixing it up, but I think the city manager needs to speak to this.
Yeah, thank you. I think we'll get the answers that you're asking for, and we'll drop the note in here, and when we bring this forward, we'll have those answers.
Perfect.
So I
I'm
think,
mixing them up.
yeah, no problem. I think, Wayne, from what I'm gathering here, I think hopefully you've gathered the same. I think council is the opinion we need to engage the construction association and the builders and contractors. And I guess the comment I'd like to leave is that at whatever you folks bring forward from the planning side of the building code, we want to ensure that we're as level playing field across the city. And I think that's what I hear day in and day out. We operate as one city. So if there's standards that are lesser on one side than the other, I'm going to lean to the lesser side because I want to ensure that it's fair across the city so that we level the playing field. And I guess that's the ability, and I believe the charter allows us to do that, to ensure that we continue to see growth on both sides of the city. It doesn't matter on which side you belong, north, south, east, west, that does not get inhibited by any way that we do something here. So I think that's my direction I'm getting, and I think we want to ensure that. I hear Councilor Baker, and I understand when a new code comes in, do we want to adopt it? No, I think a little bit of breathing time, and we're almost there with the 2015 code, but let's see what the industry is understanding of it and the energy, because at the end of the day, it's important that we can conserve energy, but I think we also want not stymie the construction in this city and tie the builders and the developers to a point that they can't build. So I hope that gives you enough information to work with to take back.
Thank you, Your Worship, and as well, I took Councillor Patrick's thoughts as well into play. We've got old buildings versus new buildings, you know, to the building code regulations still apply. At what point do they apply? Is it like renovation time? Certainly, those are questions that are worth delving into.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the presentation, and we'll look forward to an update back from you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Moving on to agenda item number 4.2, the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association. City Manager.
I'll have Stan Hobson to come forward and present.
Good afternoon, Dan.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Council. So I'm here today to get some feedback from the committee and council about proceeding forward with membership in the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association. It's a non-profit organization to promote the Yellowhead Corridor. We've been a member for some time in various degrees. Since 1992 is our records, but I can imagine we've been in the group for a little bit longer than that. It is a budget item right now, sitting around $5,000 is the membership fee per capita. That would be basically most of the information at this point that's outside of the IR. I believe Councillor Buckingham is the representative, so he can maybe speak to it a little more than I can, but we've attached a update of their latest accomplishments too for your review.
Councillor, do you want to speak to it, or I certainly can too as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm the appointee for Saskatchewan on the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association. Myself and Councillor Randy Golden from York are the only two councillors that are remaining on there. The mayor and I attended the annual general meeting 1 year ago in Edmonton, and there was quite a lot of unrest in the group, to put it that way. I guess that's a way you can put it. This group is funded by municipalities. Two of the largest municipalities within that group along the Yellowhead Highway have pulled out of their membership, which would be Edmonton and Saskatoon. So they're struggling to find some direction as to which way they would like to take the association, to the point of wondering if they were going to even carry on at all. So we had our board meeting for the association on Friday, and a few more municipalities have pulled out of the association, including Edson and Yellowhead County, which is Edson, Jasper, in that area as well. Their AGM is coming up on the 6th of April, and they're looking at maybe so far 30% have paid their memberships to date for this year. It's not necessarily past due or anything at this point, but they're waiting to see what's going to come in that way. I've attended the meetings, and I just wonder, I just really wonder, the city pays me to go to these meetings. We pay a $5,200, I believe is the actual number of our association fee for this year, and I just wonder about our commitment there and whether we're getting a bang for our buck, basically. I know in the grand scheme of a budget for the city, $5,000 doesn't seem like a huge sum of money, But at the same time, to me, it does. If we could take that money and put it somewhere else, if we feel that we could advocate for ourselves in a better direction, I just question the value of the city's investment in my time going forward to these. We have a long-standing membership in this association, as do lots of municipalities, but it was just something I wanted to bring up because I think out of respect, we should have this decision made previous to their AGM. And I would have to resign from the board if we decide to go that way, or I will carry on the board if we decide to go that way. But just a decision I wanted to bring up for discussion. So everybody was aware. I know I circulated the board meeting minutes to everybody on council last week, and I attended the board meeting on Friday. So, but the AGM was the 6th.
Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question if anyone in the room knows. So we've got an advocacy update, what they plan to do for the year coming up. Do we know whether or not in their advocacy in the past, whether they've had any wins? Like, have they ever had any success with anything? Because if they haven't, then, well, best thing we could do is, if we stayed on the list, to try and get something we needed on the list, but if they've never had any wins, well, there wouldn't be a lot of point in that.
I'll take a shot at it, if I may. Certainly they believe there's been some value. And I guess this is a debatable point just in that sort, because from the perspective, their local community, the local constituency they lie in, would be lobbying their respective government. There is some federal input, and we heard, as Councillor Buckingham indicated, we both attended last year's annual general meeting, and our thought was, let's give this a year and see where this is going. Let's see if there's some value. And the value we just could not seem to find, honestly. They have certainly done some things they are taking credit for. The continuing of the 20 to 16 highway east of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and Saskatchewan. A lot of work in British Columbia, the government of Alberta doing work on the Yellowhead in Edmonton. All attributes to the Yellowhead. Did the actual association make that happen? And that was the question that Councillor Buckingham and I looked at. It's hard to say. Is it a strong enough group? And the concern we have, and we've talked about it before this meeting, just chatting briefly over this, was that, where is the value? Because you don't have Edmonton sitting at the table, but Saskatoon, the Yellowhead runs through both of those cities and plays a very major part of that. And what we're seeing is the membership is asking the same question. I did speak to the Mayor of Yorkton last week and asked him where they stood, and they said, well, it's certainly it runs right through their city as it does through our city. And he said, we're wrestling with it. I don't know where they stand on it exactly. We didn't make a commitment one way or another. One of the challenges I'll share, and then I'll get to you, Councillor Buckingham, due to the continuous pressures on the provincial budgets, highways and transportation departments are on their constant strain. So it is a fight to see those extra dollars to what's not already going on. And I think anyone can say, depending on which side of the spectrum you sit, that governments are trying to do the best they can do with highways. Others are saying there's not enough money. And then there's never enough money. We know that the structure is a constant battle. But their lobbying has certainly got the 16 highway twin that we know today that runs on both sides of our city. Some took longer than others, but it's twinned. What can we ask for next? That's a debatable question, because we've had that debate in this council, and it's been debated for the last 3 or 4 councils. The bypass of the city, that would be a huge, but is that going to be the Yellowhead Association that makes that happen or not? I don't think it would if that's what we ended up going down that road. And it may happen with or without us, because that's going to be a decision of the federal and provincial government, I understand. So I'm really at a crossroads, because Councillor Buckingham and I talked about this, the value for money. When we put out dollars, what are we seeing value for this city? So I'll turn it back to you, Councillor Buckingham. I know where I stand on it, but your input, and I think Councillor Baker had a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things to help for your information. There's currently a reserve fund set up in the association, which they're now using. I get the feel that they're using it because things are coming to an end. Sounds harsh to say, but I think that they're trying to position themselves for that. And the last thing I'll say is that the next president that's going to be elected, the president-elect that will be elected or appointed at the AGM this year is supposed to be from Saskatchewan, which leaves myself and Councillor Golden as the two options to be elected president with no other options on the table at this particular time. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of buy-in from the province of Saskatchewan at this point, just for information.
And when you say the province, it's actually the cities, towns, and municipalities of 16 highway
Yep.
directly affects.
Yep, for sure.
Border
Yeah.
to border.
They've been currently for the last year trying to engage local chambers of commerce and different things as well to get in and buy a membership into this with very little to no success.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Elwood's been around for a long time, the Elwood Association, and unfortunately, as some things get done in certain areas, people say, okay, we got ours fixed, we'll take our ball and bat and go home. This is a lot bigger than Lloydminster or Saskatoon or Edson or anybody else. And I can tell you certain parts of it that I know about, especially in northern BC, going into Prince Rupert, and the improvements were made. You can always argue, did lobbying help or did advertising help? Is it tangible? How tangible is it? But I know one thing from, whether it be federal or provincial governments, they want to talk to an organized group. They don't want to talk to 100 little municipalities across the province. And I know, and I give them full credit, Alderman Caford and Alderman McKay are two long-serving members of the Elwood. Alderman Caford must have been on there 10, 12 years, and Cecil McKay, prior to that, I just forget the years, but for 10 or 12 years. And they were really into this and working hard at what was going on. And there's lots of improvements out there that still need to be done, but if you have nobody lobbying for it, it cannot get done. And I know you can't put a weight on it. I know as close as 10 miles west of here, 15 miles west of here, there's an underpass, or an overpass, whatever you want to call it, at the Kitscotty corner. That's on the agenda yet, I believe. And, you know, and how many more of those flyovers and other things that have to be done? And if we just give up because things have slowed down, remember, the economy slowed down somewhat. It's not quite as buoyant as it was 3 years ago. But maybe we need to take a little bit of a lead role and through the mayor's office, put our position and say, we think we need this across, if we do, or we don't, or whatever. But all I know is at the end of the day is, if you have no one looking after that or trying to promote the development of the Elwood, I can remember going to Jasper for years on a gravel road. And now it's a 4-lane beautiful highway. And now they're talking from Hinton to Jasper, 4-laning that through the park, and that's probably pretty rare. So there's been some hard work done, and maybe today it doesn't seem as important, but there's some real benefit. The other thing is we talk about Trans-Canada trucking across Canada. The highways aren't finished between Winnipeg and Prince Rupert yet. Just take a trip and you'll see there's lots of room for improvement. In Manitoba now, I don't know in the last 3 years, there's a lot of, the number one don't even have paved shoulders. They have gravel shoulders, or did. I don't know if they still do, but. So you gotta look at that side of it too. Look at it as a big picture rather than just Lloydminster. $5,000 is probably better well spent on doing something that serves the bigger community than some of the things we spend money on that don't really serve very much. So it's something to think about. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Check.
Yeah, thanks, Worship. I have a similar view, because I think, I remember hearing an interview on CBC Radio where the vision for the Yellowhead Trail was for it to be a complete freeway from start to finish. That meant no lights on it, no stop signs, so that when you started on it, you could go nonstop all the way across Canada, and that's the vision for the Yellowhead Trail. The second part, I guess, around this is that how we try to use it. And the third part is, I had a conversation with a fellow today about, economic development in Lloydminster, how do we position ourselves, and he talked a lot about the intangibles. Sometimes we get hung up on the tangible parts that we see every day on our face. But he said it's also really, really important to recognize some of the features that Lloydminster has, which is the road access, the rail access, and we're part of that Yellowhead. And I think by being part of it and being part of the organization, we become present in that conversation where questions come up and what about the Yellowhead and what's on the Yellowhead? Yeah, we're on the Yellowhead, by the way. We have a chance to influence that discussion. We have a chance to point to us to say that yes, we're on that highway. Yes, we are part of it, and these are the benefits you get when you drive into Lloydminster as well as all the other transportation pieces. Those are those intangibles that it's difficult to pin a value on. But if you're not there at the table having those discussions, you don't get a chance to say it, and no one's going to say it for you. So as we talk about economic development, we talk about making sure our voice and our name is present. This is one of those opportunities. And if we're looking at an investment in economic development, this is pretty cheap. Our name's there. Maybe we have the president. I don't know whether that's something you want to do, I guess, but the presence of Lloydminster in that context takes on a different role. And what's that worth to us? We may get nothing out of it. We may get something out of it. The other part of it, I guess, is that, are we fair weather members? We're only in it and we get something out of it? Or are we members because we believe in the long-term vision? And I think at this point, there's probably a lot of people wondering why they're in it, because perhaps they haven't looked far enough afield, maybe they haven't seen a benefit. But the other part of it is maybe staying in front of it is the challenge for us. What do we see as part of this vision for us? What can Lloydminster be as part of this Yellowhead Trail? Can we take on a different role? Can we take on a different perspective? And I think that's part of the challenge, because it's easy to say we save $5,000, $10,000. And so what have you done for the city today then? Oh, geez, we just took our name off a list where we're included with every city across this country who's on a Yellowhead Trail.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Monroe.
I definitely appreciate everybody's perspective on the situation, and I actually had a completely different opinion coming in until I just heard Ken and Councillor Diachuk's comments. For me, I guess we do have to look beyond those deliverables and what is the bigger picture and how it does benefit our community in a wide range, more of a regionalization or Canadian-wide, really. What does it mean to have our name as part of that long-term vision? And I was one that thought, we're saving $5,000, that's great. We should maybe save the $5,000 because we're not benefiting from it directly. But when I look at it from Ken and Councillor Diachuk's comments, it makes so much more sense to actually perhaps stay on as being part of this organization that's really bigger than ourselves. And although it's maybe not directly benefiting our community at this current time, even being part of something that is nationwide is really something to be of note as well. So,
Thank you, Worship. I should just clarify, people keep referencing it. This association is Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia only. So it has nothing to do with a nationwide push or anything like that, just so we're all clear on what this association represents. Is just those provinces. And the reason that Saskatchewan's up for a president is they rotated through those provinces. So currently the president is from Valemount, BC, and Saskatchewan's turn is this year, but it's only Manitoba, Saskatchewan, BC, and Alberta.
So, Councillor Baker, you did mention the mayor's office, and when I attended the meeting last year, one of the things we saw immediately was the cost of the office rental. And I spoke to the mayor for the county of Strathcona and asked her if they were prepared to take the office if we could get out of the lease. And she said she'd have to bring it back to council. Said I would certainly bring it back to our council. And that's maybe something we need if we decide to stay. I think that's one of the major issues. Is we have $30,000. They have a $30,000 office lease in the city of Edmonton. And as I say, Councillor Buckingham, when I talk about some of these things, what's the cost driver? Because that's a huge part of it. Certainly have the executive director that's a part-time, I guess, or a two-thirds time position. But, we're paying $30,000 as an association of rent. And I think we could find somewhere that we could find a home for that individual or that office. And certainly in a member's locale rather than a non-member's locale. From that perspective, my mind has changed a bit, and you've made some very valid points from that perspective. One of the challenges is this is going to be a do or die, I think, as Councillor Buckingham said, because I'll just give you some quick numbers for your information. Currently, out of the directors' positions, there's 5 positions open for Saskatchewan. There's 2, one being Norton and one being Lloydminster occupied currently. Manitoba has 2 out of 4 positions filled. Alberta has 6 out of 7, and BC has 2 out of 6. There's committee chairs, there's 6 positions, 3 are vacant as going into the annual general meeting, and 2 are chaired by lifetime members that are no longer active in the municipalities. So one of the challenges is they're in tough, and if we're going to support it, and if Councillor Buckingham decides to let his name stand as chairperson or president, we're going to need to give them the support and give it a good go, because it needs some breath breathed into the body, because it's in tough. That's all. I just want to make sure Council's fully aware there's some challenges. Councillor Baker, I'll catch you first, and then Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. It was just a question. Councillor Buckingham said Alberta is not part of it.
No, they are.
Is that just because they just opted out against it?
No, those particular ones have opted out, but it's the association represents Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC. Each individual along the highway has the option of either being in or being out. Alberta as a province doesn't fund the transport.
No, I understand that.
No, it's just the 4 prairie provinces.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the 4 prairie provinces form that Yellowhead Association.
I just thought for some reason Alberta wasn't part of it, period.
No, Alberta has actually the highest uptake with, as the mayor said, 6 or 7 positions full.
Your worship, it's probably a review of everything. I mean, some of the big communities know that. They get hooked with these big bills for memberships. It's based on population. I mean, you do it when you go to Sula, do it when you go to Yuma, but, maybe there's another way of dealing with some of those. Now, I haven't been in touch with Yellowhead for 10 years, so I don't have any idea what's going on. I just know that some of the advantages, and I'm sure that you could talk to Cecil McKay, a long-term council member in the city. He was around when that really got going, and he took a lot of personal time and went to BC and looked at the roads. He was in the trucking business. He owned Kennedy Transport, and he certainly knew what was going on with the trucking business in Western Canada, and certainly, if I stand to be corrected, that he was made a lifetime member or something.
He very likely could be. I'm not sure of all the lifetime members. But you're absolutely right. That's why we thought it was important to have this discussion to ensure that there was comments. Councillor.
Yeah, Your Worship, I guess the other question I have, and it's kind of answered it a little bit. Around the budget financial implication talks about, annual conference, sponsoring annual conferences, supporting economic growth studies and like. So, but I was just trying to get a sense of what the strategic plan is overall. So is there an action plan that this Yellowhead Association has and says these are our goals for this year and here's how we're going to go about doing them and what's the plan for next year, I guess?
Thank you, Worship. The strat planning sessions were held late last year. Most of those are being reviewed and or adopted at the AGM. It's still a work in progress as they restructure their direction. There's more questions than answers at this point, even on the strat plan. But they did start engaging in a new strat plan in the fall.
So do we have the ability to see an old one? And what if you have access to the old one and you could just send it to us digitally when we get the city council to see it?
I've never seen the old one,
okay.
So we certainly have.
I don't think it has a sense to how they operate because, we have a list of all these projects, but I don't have a sense as whether it's done ad hoc or whether there's a plan that we think these are the 10 priorities, we're going to put everything right behind it and go. It's easy to claim credit, but, is there a plan that says at the end of the day you deserve credit? And I can't tell that by just seeing it.
Yeah, their biggest push right now, to be quite honest, is membership. They're trying to get some money back in the coffers. Because as it sits right now, over 60% of the revenue that they drive is put into administration.
Yeah.
Right? 60% of it. So they're currently working on a pitch to Prince George. They're trying to figure out a way to get back in favor with Edmonton and Saskatoon. But their direction is we need membership. That's focus 1.
So I see it's, like I say, I can see the value, but the challenge I've got is that there's going to be a huge energy that has to be poured into that organization. And like I say, it's to me, it's almost on the critical side.
That's
the way I've heard everyone around the table. There's been great points, and I don't want to get into a too debate type of item as this is GPC, but it kind of sounds like we could be writing a check to get a ticket on a sinking ship. And especially with the amount of effort we'd be putting in. If I'm a taxpayer at the City of Lloyd, I understand big picture, we want to get our names out there, we want to be front and center. At what point is this the right organization when it's the one that's potentially going down? And I don't know, if I'm a taxpayer, do I really want to be paying for city councilors to be representing the highway more so than representing our community? And it's a philosophical question. I don't know what the right answer is because that's it.
Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. To Councilor Torres's point, that's exactly why this got brought up in the first place, so we can have this debate. Because the last thing I want to do is write a check for the last time to get it to go nowhere. You know, I just had serious concerns. So we wanted to debate it, and we are talking about it and getting all the information out there, so that's good. But if we cut that $5,200 check plus my expenses for going to all of these things this year to find out that next year there isn't one, that's where I wanted to bring it up.
I think again, they're all valid. I don't know that we have the evidence here. I'd really like to see what the planning process has been and what goals and where they've targeted their energies. And I mean, I see it more than just the highway. I guess I see the opportunities of being connected with all the communities along that highway. And what does that look like? I have no idea. But it just seems that there's some opportunity, and perhaps it's never been explored or unpackaged. And because the economy was good, everybody's quite happy to just attend the meeting, say, hey, life's good, we're growing. But now that we're on the downside here, everybody's going, holy moly, we don't have the money to go, and perhaps we should have done some homework when the time was good. Lord knows you've heard that story before. So it would be interesting to see their plan. If we could have that, I think it would really enrich the discussion and make the decision easier.
All right, well, I think we'll see what we can find for information between what we have at City Hall and task Councilor Buckingham if we can try and reach out and get some of the former plans. Hopefully we can bring that we're hoping to bring it to council next week for a decision. So we'll do another research and work with Dan and the ledge team and see what we can put together. All right, thank you, Dan. I think don't go too far. All right, moving on to agenda item number 5, governance and priorities. 5.1, draft traffic bylaw. City manager, turn it over to Dan.
Thank you. So we wanted to provide council with the draft traffic bylaw today. The bylaw has undergone a full rewrite. Big focus has been on modernizing it and harmonizing it. Some of the key speaking points right now at this point I can share would be requirements around bicycles, treating them more like vehicles when they are on roadways, helmet regulations for people under 18. We've also included a dangerous goods route. Right now the route is outlining this current status quo. With council's direction, we can start a stakeholder process and see if that needs to be changed or adjusted as instructed. Additionally, we've provided some clarification around playground zones. At this point, the way the bylaw is written, school zones will become playground zones, and there will be a harmonization of 7:30 a.m. till 10 o'clock p.m. are when those speed limit hours of 30 kilometers will be in effect. Council has any questions? Happy to address them.
Councilman Mill.
I just have a question in regards to enforcing the helmet bylaw. So you see two young guys without a helmet on, and they're underage, so say they're 10 and 11, and how are we really going to enforce that? They're not going to tell you their real name, or they're going to ride off on their bikes. I just want to know, like,
I'll defer this to the city.
I think when you talk about enforcement, Councilor, there's many facets you can do, and I know that they're looking at a positive action ticketing so that they will get this message out there. We'll rely on the schools. Currently, right now, in the province of Alberta, it is illegal to ride a helmet ride a bike without a helmet under the age of 18. So we're harmonizing to that, and we're providing an opportunity to work with the students and the children to make sure that education is there.
okay, just because I can see pre-adolescent boys or girls or whoever, if they're getting pulled over by a bylaw officer, throwing out a couple curse words and speeding off, right? Just because, in all honesty, I foresee that in my mind. So I was just wondering in terms of how we were going to try and enforce those things.
Compliance is always the first.
Right, for sure.
And then they'll get to know the youth, and if they speed off, usually you know where they're at. And there's always one that stops and says, I wasn't part of that. It works.
Right. And I just wanted to comment on a few of these things. Parking in handicap zone, upping it to $300. I think that will by upping a lot of these fines is definitely going to help promote people following the bylaws a lot. I went through the whole thing, so it looks good to me. Besides, I was just wondering about the enforcement on the helmets.
Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a question on, same as the handicap parking type ones, because most parking lots are private property, correct? So are these bylaws in effect on the private property, or is this only in public property? So like, let's say I'm at Walmart, and that's owned by the power center. Are we still able to take it on that private property? In the same way that the city isn't forced to, clear their lots and everything else?
Councillor, yes, absolutely we can. Any place it's a public access. So council, the bylaw officers could go in there. If you look at the bylaw service standards currently right now, they're doing the quarterly enforcement within those private lots. We don't actively patrol those lots, but we do a quarterly enforcement on those. If we received a complaint, we would action that complaint.
I was just going to say general comment. If that John character was here today, he would say, yes, you should be enforcing on the handicap parking and people who that have proper permits, as well as parking in fire lanes. That's one that he's mentioned to me many times that really grinds his gears, and the fire lanes one grinds my gears too.
Absolutely. He's very passionate about that, and I think that as the conversation's been held many times, certainly we try to respond to complaints as best as they can through the bylaw team and the police officers.
Yeah, it's really fun to read this, because I was looking at the fines, and actually one of them went down, and I was kind of shocked by that. So there's one where you're, it's in front of me here.
Actually, 3 went down.
Well, 3 went down. I was like, so yeah, park on the sidewalk or boulevard went down from $75 to $50. And there was another one. Yeah, here we go. 3 meters of a fire hydrant, it went down from $75 to $50. And I was going, are you kidding me? That's got to be a severe safety kind of violation where we've upped it if you're in front of an emergency exit, upped it in front of a fire escape, and the fire lane and all those other places. So I don't know if that's a typo or not, but it was just like, I was going, whatever. That would be one I'd want to raise, so I don't know what the thinking was behind it. So the other piece around the bike helmet, which is really interesting, because there was a lady who was an activist promoting bike safety, and she said the amount of money that's been spent on having people wear helmets should have been spent on promoting bike riding safety habits, because the impact of promoting safe driving has a greater impact than just giving people helmets the way you go. I'm an advocate for helmets. My wife was riding in the park, and an idiot cut her off. She crashed, bent her bike, drove the helmet into the ground, scarred her face, nearly broke her arm, had to take her into emergency. And the guy went 50 feet past before he stopped and said, "Oh, you're okay." He just fell down, right? His riding was the issue, not the helmet. And by the same token, the helmet also prevented more serious damage she could have suffered. So it is a protective piece, and I absolutely advocate for it. But I think if there's money and some of the places where we get funds through either ticketing or whatever, as you're suggesting, either positive ticketing or something that can be done in partnerships with the schools, because I think some of that's being done now. But that promoting that safe riding and safe riding habits will go a long way to dealing with that issue. So I think, so that's kind of the only piece for me where I just thought, it's the fines. I would raise that certainly in front of a fire hydrant. The only other area we talked briefly before we started was parking in the public place, and I know that the school division in the evenings, people that were trucking would bring the B train in and park it on the parking lots by the Bishop Boyd parking lot. And some of the loads that were in there, actually, you could begin to see the dents in the pavement, and they were doing some damage. And not only that, but they're leaving behind some oil and diesel and whatever it is. And so it's not in this area here, but it's covered in another bylaw as well. So I'm glad to hear there's another spot in there where we can address that public parking piece.
And we can certainly take a look at just those cities at your direction.
Councilor Torres, back in, Councilor.
I just have a question, because I learned some stuff when I read this the other day. Standing on a roadway for the purpose of soliciting. That one caught my attention. Simply because I've seen it. Is that currently an illegal practice? We had businesses that are right adjacent to City Hall here soliciting for business with signs. Does it also affect community groups that are having a charity car wash? You know, that kind of thing. I was just curious because I never really thought of that as a finable or illegal activity. And here it sits in there. So I was just curious on that. And if it is, do they need a permit? How do you do this? Or don't do this?
I believe that provision refers to a taxi. So a taxi that stops in the middle of the road to flag a fare, not somebody on the sidewalk attempting to solicit you to come into their business. Although that business would be conducting business on a public sidewalk and need a permit.
Yeah, just curious. I thought of charities and those types of people right away that have those signs out there and the kids car washing $5 for their football team or whatever, right? So just something that kind of piqued my interest.
As long as those organizations aren't disrupting traffic or causing danger, then they're usually allowed to continue.
Councilor Baker.
Well, thank you, Rick. Just a note, we have parked on an unregistered vehicle, or uninsured vehicle on the road, we got in there twice. But that's okay. Does this apply to taxis and everything? Do these rules apply to taxis?
Yeah.
And we're serious about that?
And this,
You know where I'm coming from.
yeah, I think I do, Councillor, and I'll say this. Every one of these bylaws is, and what's being proposed here in the, under the summary fee, things happen, and we know people speed. Not everybody gets a speeding ticket. But if they do get caught doing these, if you're an infraction, this is the fine that would be attached. So it is applicable to everyone. As we know, we can't always have a peace officer, a bylaw officer, and a safety officer in every corner. But if if it's anyone that has a licensed vehicle that commits one of these, this is the fine that they could be imposed. So if they're making a U-turn where they shouldn't be making a U-turn and they get caught, this is going to be this will be the number that's being proposed that can be attached to that. I think, is that the question you were kind of aiming towards?
I mean, there's a couple other things in here.
Certainly.
Our city is full of big trucks, and we're in the oil business. And I look at these, using engine retarders, there was no charge. You got a $300,000 to $5,000 fine. Last year I looked at the fines, and the only fines we didn't collect were the ones over $2,000. So I don't know how we're going to collect these, but I think that's pretty harsh. A retarder on a truck, and I'm not a truck driver, that's part of the safety equipment. They don't need to use them all the time, but sometimes you do. Because I asked a trucker this morning, he said sometimes you need them. So in terms of fines, is that realistic? $5,000 if you get caught 3 times a year with a retarder? And where does that start? When you hit the city limits. If you're out west of Princess Auto Corner, what do you call it? 80th? You're in the city limits for half a mile or a quarter of a mile, I don't know. Would we be issuing tickets in an area like that if a guy's using his retarder, engine retarder? If you are, I don't think that's fair. If they're using it right downtown, that's a different story. But well, out in the outskirts, there's just something wrong with that. In my view.
I'll let the city clerk answer the question, I think, if you don't mind.
So when we look at the fines for use of an engine retarder within the community, we've looked broadly, and these tend to be fairly large fines throughout communities. We can speak to the number of complaints that we've received as a result of large vehicles using engine retardants within the community, and people are pretty frustrated with them. Yes, they are a safety piece of the vehicle, but most communities, if not almost all communities, outlaw the use of engine retardant brakes within an urban or built-up area.
I guess my location, like 12th Street and out in the West End or east of the Co-op service station, and where they're coming in under the underpass, they're in the city. would we be hanging around out there giving tickets? That's what I'm asking.
If we received a large amount of complaints, we would go out there and investigate, and once again, education becomes.
Quite frankly, I'd sooner you didn't, I'd sooner they slow down.
Yeah.
But
I was just to add to this, if I could, that I had several people mention to me about the use of engine retarder brakes, and their biggest complaint was used during the night. And so we have senior residences that are close by here, and one fellow spoke about his grandmother nearly had a heart attack because when the guy reefed on the brakes, so he's probably trying to make the green light, then tried to make the yellow light, and then realized he wasn't going to make it and laid on the brakes. So he was speeding, not driving safely. And so would that guy have earned his fine? Absolutely. But he was downtown here. But what I'm hearing, the bulk of these events are not happening during the day when we have traffic going on. Lots of traffic, people are generally slowing down because they're going to try to stay with the traffic. But when there's not much traffic on the road and they're trying to run a light, that's when we've seen the biggest frequency of these.
Councilor Forrest.
I have a fun fact for you. Did anyone know that I actually have my air brakes license? You wouldn't have believed it. I used to have to drive a big truck, had engine retarder. So what, basically, it's not used like, in the situation you're describing, that person's downshifting or something like that. An engine retarder is literally the engine slowing it down rather than pushing on any kind of brakes and putting air into it to lock it up. That's not the same thing. But I was just going to say, on 70 of that, I rode the backs onto that. And oh my goodness, trucks going down there, slowing down, going towards Sobeys. All hours of every day is brutal. You can set up just behind Sobeys and get them all day, every day, because you're not supposed to use them. There's a sign that says you're not supposed to use them. Follow the law. Straight up, follow the law, that's it. Because he's got small kids. Wakes them up all the time. The worst.
That's pretty good.
See, that's a pretty good impression. It's a Charlie drove a truck. Councilor Buckingham.
I also have my class 1A. I can't do the impression as well. But it is as simple as a switch on the dash. It's on there, and I've forgotten it, right? Outside the city, of course. But it stays on until you let off the gas, and it engages as soon as you let off the throttle. So yeah, it does happen from time to time. It's not hitting a switch, it's engaged. In the truck I drive, it's engaged right now. And as soon as I go to slow down, brake, or do anything, it's going to kick in if I don't actually turn it off. So people do forget.
They do, and I think I appreciate what you're saying, Councilor Baker. It is a fairly stiff fine, but I think at the point, and I think that I would hope our police officers, bylaw officers, and RCMP would use discretion. If they were coming in off the 16 from 110 to 80, they're going to likely use that Jake. But once they hit that first set of lights, they should be turning that switch off until they leave the last set of lights, which leaves our city limits. So basically, as they get experience, and my experience, again, I limited a little bit, and I don't have my 1A to compare with councillors, but I've driven a larger truck, is that truck drivers will soon appreciate, once the word gets out, that these guys are serious about Jake brakes. There won't be a problem, because truck drivers do share and speak very openly on the two-way radio, that they'll let them know that the city is cracking down on Jake brakes, and the switch will come off. And once they leave the city, they can turn it back on, and I do understand, there's no question, it's got a value, but it also saves their brakes and clutching a great deal of work. I think any truck driver that's driven a big truck knows that it's a pain, and the Jake was invented for both a safety feature as well as an economics feature, because you allow the engine brake to provide the braking rather than the braking system. So on that one, I think that once the first couple $300 fines get passed out, it'll get spread between Kindersley Transport and every other trucking firm going through town.
Your first words were great to hear, discretionary.
Yeah.
I can tell you, what I went through with this city at a point in my life is when we have radar, what do you call it, the photo radar? Mm-hmm. And we were catching people going out of town west of the Princess Auto Corner for about 400 yards there, it was 80 miles an hour. Now it's 80 miles an hour to Vermilion, or 80 kilometers to Vermilion. People used to just get livid about our photo radar guys sitting out there west of those lights, catching people going west. Coming east was different, because they're coming into town. They're speeding and going out. And I just looked at it Sunday, I went to Vermilion, and I thought, that stupid sign is still there. And I suppose we're still giving tickets there.
I hope not, because
I hope not,
I
too.
think, from a law perspective, and I'll let the city clerk can certainly comment on, but discretion is the better part of that. I think that,
That's
I
important.
mean, that's
I think
important.
that, you know,
That's so important when we're dealing with bylaws, just as Councilor Monroe brought up the kids with the bicycle helmets. I think that education is the best part of it, and I think the RCMP will agree with that because they deal with this on a regular basis outside the city and in the city, traffic accidents and things like that. So the intention of the fines, I really believe, is to be a deterrent, just like I remind people about photo radar. If you don't speak, you won't hear from the city. We're pretty easy to get along with. But if you do speak...
but nobody's guilty in this room, right?
I can only speak for myself, and it's been an awful long time since we did take pictures going out the other way, but I won't talk about that. Councilor Dyche.
So one quick question, driving a vehicle on a roadway while displayed for sale, $50 fine. What's that all about? Doesn't everybody put for sale when they're trying to sell a vehicle, or what's the harm in it?
If I can answer that one, the harm is because it places an obstruction in the window, and it cuts down on the ability for a driver's vision. So in most cases, that's a provincial offense as well.
So if you put it on the side of the vehicle, it's okay, but not in the glass?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe we should be specific then.
Then I would think the officer would be very specific if he felt there was the need, that if you had the graphics that simply, and you see that sometimes on black vehicle, white lettering, for sale, call, and it's not on the window, because it stands out and it's just in the way of the marketing. Whereas you actually have a sign that's in somebody's back window taking up space from that obstruction. Councilor Thorson.
I think we've already, it's around the enforcement thing, but, and I think we probably already answered it. My only other one was I'll go with the jaywalking one. Crossing the roadway other than a place designated as a pedestrian crosswalk. I know I've sent out a message or two to a previous city manager as far as there's areas in town where there's not a good place to cross. So then is there not some responsibility on our part, if we have any plans to enforce this, to ensure that every single logical crossing point is considered a designated crosswalk? Does that mean signs, and does that mean road paint, or does that just mean a corner? And I don't know, I guess would have some questions around where that is and whether it's realistic to ever enforce that one at all.
Just for some clarity, any intersection or where two roadways meet is a crosswalk, whether it's marked or not, and if you've taken your driver's license, that's where it's there. The idea behind this provision is if somebody crosses mid-street and a vehicle has to brake to avoid them, then they've done an unsafe act and they should be discussed at that point. Once again, it's discretion and how it's enforced. If there's no cars coming for half a kilometer and somebody runs across the middle of the road, I don't think that our enforcement officer, in fact, I'm pretty sure our enforcement officers isn't bothered with that.
Okay. Yeah, just making sure we're clear on that. Thanks.
So, Councilor Dudchuk mentioned there was 3 spots in there. We went from a $75 fine down to $50. Parking within 3 meters of a fire hydrant, parking on a sidewalk or boulevard, or parking a trailer on a roadway for more than 48 hours. All dropped from $75 to $50. And I'm just kind of curious, and I'd send that back to administration just to do a little more soul searching on that. Because the fire hydrant one for sure, I think that would be a good one to possibly take to $100 or $150 from a fire perspective. Councilor Buckingham could enlighten to us about that.
Well, let's leave it because we like nothing better than putting a hose through a window.
It looks good on TV, so I'm sure our department would do the same. I'm sure if Chief Newton would be here, he'd like a little vehicle extrication practice. The one that concerns me a little bit is the 48-hour trailer parking versus a vehicle parking of 72 hours. And a little bit of a change, I believe, and as an owner of a trailer, I would love to see it 72 hours rather than 48. And that I know it's just one day, but if people prepare or come back from camping in the city, and we certainly have no shortage of recreation vehicles as well as just commercial trailers, but I'd like to see 72 hours and stay the same with the vehicles, so it's pretty much a standard that way. Great to see the school zone, so I think that will need some communication to people, but at least will be standardized. It's not one side or the other. And the other piece that no one's talked about is the dangerous goods route, and I just wanted to bring that up. And I think that It will spark some conversation because I think people in the community would like to see 16 highway and 17 highway being free of dangerous goods, and I'm afraid I don't think that's going to be possible at this time because they are both national and bi-provincial highways. So I appreciate designating some other routes. I think that's important because I often get inquiries from residents, why is this truck down this road? It will not eliminate completely delivery trucks delivering groceries and produce and merchandise within our city, but dangerous goods routes is a good thing. It'll hopefully encourage the use where there will be exceptions made to reach a shop or something like that. So I think that's well done, and I'm looking forward to hearing people's input from people in the community and the industry, because as Councillor Baker alluded to, we are an oil industry community. There's a lot of trucks, but in the same token, I think that they need to understand that the entire city is not at the will of trucks to be parked and driven around. So good work on the dangerous goods route. Any other comments from council?
Just grammatical. That one you brought up, I circled that. Park a trailer, whether hitched or unhitched, it says park a trailer.
Trailer, yeah. Just a little typo
We're
error.
looking at bylaw stuff.
Any other comments? Got a little bit of work for you, Dan, but thank you very much. All right, moving on to 5.2, draft smoking bylaw. See, Dan, you're next lucky contestant on this one as well.
Yeah, so again, this is a complete rewrite of bylaw. Currently, the existing bylaw bans prohibits smoking in closed public places. This bylaw would take a different flavor of the day, and it would ban it in all public places. This is also largely done to align itself with cannabis regulations coming down from the provinces. We're still waiting a little bit on Saskatchewan to fully identify what they're going to be doing from where you can consume cannabis, but as of right now, Alberta is largely just aligned with their tobacco regulations. So if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer them as well.
I'm looking at council to start with. I know I've got a couple here. Just for my information and for the residents' information, Bud Miller Park is considered a public place, is it not?
Yes.
Okay, so today it should be smoke-free, and I don't know, I don't spend enough time in the park to be. Is there designated smoking areas within the Bud Miller Park at all?
So the current bylaw that we have would ban smoking in enclosed public places. So that would be defined as a structure with a roof. So I believe there'd be a pavilion and an indoor building in Bud Miller where you would be prohibited from smoking. Currently, there would be nothing right now stopping that.
Okay.
Oh, actually, there's a sign that says no smoking in that playground area there.
All of
Right
our
by the water park.
all of our signs are almost voluntarily. Thank you for keeping our parks free, or parks smoke free, and things along those lines.
Yeah, and that's that one.
Okay. Are sidewalks considered public places?
The way it's defined in this bylaw right now, no, they are not. It's where the public can gather. As we wouldn't view the sidewalk as that at this point, with the exception of if downtown were closed off or something like that, where there'd be an outdoor festival, then that would change slightly. This comes back a little bit to where we're still waiting for Saskatchewan so we can harmonize and see what's going to happen. So as I said, in Alberta, wherever tobacco is allowed, cannabis is allowed right now. Saskatchewan hasn't made that clear yet if they are going to allow that. Secondary, in addition to that, is there'd be some provincial public intoxication laws around cannabis on sidewalks that wouldn't impact tobacco. So we're still waiting a little bit for that, but my answer right now would be no.
Councilor Dyson?
So, quick question, have we, on record, any tickets issued for people smoking in the vehicle with children in it?
I wouldn't not have that information, we could get that for you.
I have the same question like we're talking about bikes and helmets and whatnot, and it's just, it's one thing to create a rule and say this is wonderful and we get it. The next question is, how do we enforce it and who has the time to do it and all the other pieces, right? So it considers that back end of it. So and I know that you're not supposed to smoke in the vehicle if there's children in there and that kind of thing, and I'm just wondering, there's that rule, and if are we actually enforcing it, or because I'm sure people are not with it enough to know it's a rule and continue to do it, and I've seen it. And do we have RCMP stopping people and issuing a ticket, or is it police officers, or who does it? And
So cannabis would not be allowed in the vehicle at
Yeah,
all.
I get
That
it.
one would be with the youth, it's not allowed, so city clerk, I don't know, do you have information if there's tickets?
I honestly couldn't speak to the statistics around once again, it's one of those ancillary items when an officer's dealing with an item.
Yeah.
It may be another one of those concerns that pop forward when somebody is smoking. And in most cases, once again, it would be, you're not supposed to smoke with a child in the vehicle. The ticketing would be only if somebody was not compliant. The way records are kept from law enforcement nowadays, if you're stopped for an offense and you're re-stopped for that offense, the officer does know that you've been told that. That's
Councilor Torrance.
Thank you, Richard. I'm just a little, I don't know if I'm confused or not reading it properly. As far as like in a public place, so we're saying in this, there's still potential to smoke marijuana like downtown. Like let's say you're at the Root and you're watching a show. I'm asking for a friend. No, I'm just joking. Let's say you're at the Root and someone goes out, they can go within 5 meters and smoke marijuana under these circumstances?
So, the Root being Saskatchewan side again, I'm not 100% at that point with that, but largely what we're leaning towards in this bylaw is right now that it would be no.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. That's what I was hoping to hear. And even the 5 meters of a public doorway, if it is cannabis on any side of the border, 5 meters is not far enough for how smelly that stuff is. I don't know if there's enough meters to cover off what's appropriate, but yeah. Never mind.
I've never smelled it.
So, just another piece here, I guess, because we're talking about smoking. And it just occurred, what about the non-odorous consumption? So should that be incorporated somehow in here? Will that appear in a different part of the bylaws or?
Like vaping?
No, not vaping. So what if you have those brownies that everybody talks about, right? So my friend, I think it's Jonathan. Yeah, no. Just kidding. But so when I'm looking at this, so it's just not smoking, but what about the overall consumption of it? So if I stand there and watching these people there, and so they're consuming and having these brownies, so what's the difference between that and then smoking?
Edibles currently would not be legalized right now, so
Okay.
that would be the main thing is it would be illegal.
I think if I understand correctly, it's going to be 1 full year before edibles show up.
Okay.
That's my understanding. And once again, it comes down to the ability to enforce. If somebody's standing outside, if Mr. Stanning's outside City Hall having his brownie, we don't know
Everybody's
whether that brownie is laced with anything or not, or if he's just breaking his diet.
That'll be no more brownies coming from the mayor's house. So, from that perspective, certainly I think that I appreciate the work that you put into this, Dan, and the Legislative Services Group, because there is going to be an opportunity for people to comment on this, and I think this is a good time to mention your voice night that's going to be held on the evening of April 19th, where people can come forward and ask questions. This hopefully will have made a first reading of council, but certainly not a final reading, as we still need some more instructions from the provincial government of Saskatchewan to fulfill the final obligations to ensure that we're staying within the provincial laws. Information given to us to this point, and I'm sure it's going to, if council's not aware of it, Saskatchewan has come out with 19 as the age, Alberta's 18. So the situation we currently see with alcohol in our city, that you can consume on one side of the city at 18 and purchase, is going to be the same with cannabis. You're going to have the same rules that you have to be 19 in Saskatchewan. So not much has changed from what the Liquor Control Act and things like that, which the Cannabis Control Act, or whatever they call it at the provincial levels, will meet those very similar criteria, I suspect. Any other questions on the draft smoking bylaw at this time? Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you for giving us some good information to work on. Moving on to 5.3, draft business license bylaw. City manager, through to Dan.
Thank you again, Your Worship. So the business license bylaw, we did not do a full reread on this. This was just a review. and there was a bit of updating and harmonization in this bylaw. Most notably is to include a cannabis retailer, and as you can see, we also add additional fees to align with the tobacco fees, as well as introduce them for alcohol retailers as well at this point. More in the bylaw as well, there's been some clarity around temporary business license. We didn't have them currently, so this is for someone out of town business that would be coming in to do business for like 1 day or something. An example would be cleaning signs. They wouldn't need a full business license. There'd be a smaller fee license for them. As well as we've updated some of the timing around the fees, prorated basically. If you were new business starting your business at 6 months throughout the year, you wouldn't have to pay a full business license fee. It'd be prorated for the 6 months or along those lines. So again, any questions?
Again, I'll start if I may, Dan. Growing and processing of cannabis, is that covered in their business bylaws? I didn't see it.
So it's not identified out as a standalone, because it would just be an industrial use. So it would fall under based on the square footage of it. If it's something council wants us to full on identify, we can, but from our standpoint, and I believe planning and development, we rely on this, that it's an industrial use.
And covered, because again, consumption cannot be occurring at one of those, either a processing or a growing operation, the same as what I understand, but I just wanted to confirm my information is what you understand as well.
Is industrial the same as agriculture though? So what is it actually classified under? Because is it agriculture, I think?
So we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. The land use bylaw will speak to those type of uses.
Okay.
So this speaks to the definition of for a business license.
Okay.
But when we talk about production and those type of items, that would fall into the land use bylaw.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you. Councilor Benjamin.
So one of the things that I thought about is that some of the distributors of medical cannabis do so only via, it's online. So do we have a section here to address even if they're online sales? Or would that be captured in the bylaw where they operate the business from?
We do not have anything in here to address online sales. Through the bylaw itself, if you are conducting business within the city of Lloydminster, you need a business license. So you can loosely make that connection, but we haven't addressed online businesses in this business license bylaw.
Councilor Baker and Councilor Towson.
Thank you, Roger. I'm not sure if I'm in the right section, but I had a question about enforcement. Now, what I'm talking about is the cannabis. Okay. And I'm sure every one of you had lots of people asking, how is the law going to enforce these bylaws or laws? Whether they're, do we know yet?
So if I can take my first take at the cat, depends on which law is broken, Councilor Baker. So there's federal laws, provincial laws, and there'll be city bylaws.
So I'm driving my car down the road and I'm loaded.
Then maybe I'll let the city clerk address this, please.
So if you're operating a vehicle under the influence of either an alcohol or drug, and even right now, if you're under the alcohol or drug, then you can be charged under the criminal code for such, even right now.
I understand that. It's alcohol, they can do breathalyzer tests.
Yeah.
How do they deal with narcotics? Or like cannabis? How do they test you?
So currently, right now, the federal government is working on using officer identification, and they're working on further means to identify. But that's once again a federal. Currently, right now, Section 253A and 253B of the criminal code speaks to driving impaired.
So what is the law?
So the law says you can't drive impaired.
So
okay, now I'm going to enforce this. I'm a police officer. People are saying, how do they check to see if you're using it or not?
So they have a couple different, from the information I've been able to glean and previous experience, they would have reason. They may smell it. The smell that identify that marijuana has been used in the vehicle or has been consumed by the individual. Then, as the city clerk had stated, there's not like the breathalyzer. It's not that simple today. There's work being done, but if an officer believes someone is incapacitated or they should not be operating that vehicle, they would be, I believe, taken back to the RCMP detachment, where there is an officer that will be trained, will be able to determine, based on his experience and his designation, whether that person is impaired. So that's what's there today.
Somebody could be impaired and the policeman wouldn't know it, he's got a cold.
He could, there's that challenge, that's that challenge. So what's happening, and I agree with you, Councillor, I see you shaking your head, this is one of the challenges that's been raised at the municipal level, provincial level, and federal level. We're not ready, but the federal government, in their decision, is saying they're prepared to move forward. So the work is being done, and I don't know if even the RCMP have the latest update as to the new devices or equipment that's being looked at to be able to do something to determine if you're impaired under cannabis. So
Did you say
once-
the municipalities were up to?
well, we'll be responsible to pay for it, of course, as you know, but the RCMP are working with the federal government, and they're trying to come up with some sort of device that an individual, however they need to do that, because removing blood is not an easy process, and it usually takes a blood warrant from my past experience. It's going to have to be something they can breathe into and hope that it works. And it's being tested because we know once it comes out, I can almost guarantee you, it will go to the Supreme Court of Canada and somebody will challenge that they were not
I
impaired.
know who's gonna pay for it.
And you know this, we've discussed this very clearly. So it is a challenge that we have, and this is one of the challenges I find out of being the bottom end of the politician line rather than the top end. We get it right in the ear, as you would say. So in this case, it can be done by the RCMP. Our peace officers would be able to, I'll let you speak to the peace officers that we have.
So if there's a provincial act and the Traffic Safety Act that speaks to a temporary suspension, then our peace officers will be able to do it to it, deal with that issue. But currently, right now, it is not. It is a criminal issue, so it would be the RCMP that would deal with it.
Councilor?
Thank you, Your Worship. So we don't have any idea in terms of the costs that are going to come along with enforcing this for the RCMP right now? Like not even a ballpark? Because my overall point would be there's going to be additional costs because of 4, maybe 5 specific businesses that are, well, they could get it elsewhere and we'd still have to enforce it either way. However, there's still going to be 4 or 5 businesses who more or less have a monopoly on the market. Because you can't go out and just get another license. It's not going to be an option. So you have these 4 or 5 businesses, and they're getting to reap the benefit of the profits of the city, and we, as a council, and all taxpayers are going to have to fund the cost of enforcing this. I'm just curious as to a $750 fee versus something way different to help at least fund the capital portion of the investment as far as policing this. I think that there may be some good considerations that we should think about once we have a better idea of what that number is as to who is paying for the additional enforcement, whether it's the businesses that are making substantial profits and now have a monopoly on this, or whether it is taxpayers.
That's a good point, Councilor.
Worship, a couple things. One is that I think, that by and large, even people who are stopped and are consuming alcohol can be charged with driving erratically and dangerously, even if they're not impaired. So they don't have to have the .08 to drive dangerously. So I think if we're looking at people who are driving dangerously, even if they have consumed any narcotic, any legal or illegal banned substance, they're going to be charged with driving, and not simply because they have consumed it. And I think one of the challenges on this legislation says that you can't be driving without you can't have any cannabis in your system, whereas in alcohol you can go up to a .08 level. And so I think we have 2 scenarios that are a little different, but I think the one thing that is the same is that if you're driving erratically and dangerously, you don't have to be impaired. You can be charged based on those pieces. The other thing around the cost and I guess the impact, and I may have shared before, but certainly people I talked to over Christmas that were from Colorado, and asked them, and based on our experiences and our conversations with the mayors out of Colorado as well, their comment was that the sky didn't fall, there was no Armageddon, and the biggest issues still continued to be alcohol consumption. That was the leading driver, and the biggest problem still continued to be within the community that took up the bulk of the resources and time of their police force. So I know we're dwelling on it, and it is going to be an issue, and we should be dwelling on it because we need to have a good understanding of what we're going to get into, how we're going to deal with it. But my suspicion is that the biggest problem will continue to be what we currently have today.
That's a good point, Councillor, and I think that it's important that we come back to realize that we're dealing with the draft business license bylaw before us and the information presented. I think you've made a very good point, Councillor Diachuk, that this is an issue that has immense reach within the community on various fronts, but remind our committee that we should try and stay on task here to deal with the questions surrounding the business draft bylaw. Councilor Carson.
I just had one other question, well, I think I know the answer, is we're opening this draft business bylaw up. Are there, there's other fees we could possibly amend? There's one other one that I look at slightly differently. A cannabis business can only sell cannabis. We've established that within there. Whereas a tobacco retailer can be selling gas and goodies and everything else. And I guess the overall point that I look at the world is people who sell tobacco don't sell tobacco because they want people to smoke. They sell it because they want people to buy gas and goodies and treats, and every other place they would have to go to would have tobacco. So now they have to sell tobacco. So I think that tobacco retailers are unfairly punished by this bylaw, or by the fees of an extra $750 or an extra $1,100 that they would have to pay when they're only selling tobacco because they want to sell gas and everything else. You know what I mean? Like, it's a product you have to sell if you sell gas and treats and everything. So it's two different worlds, and I don't see why they would be paying the same fees, because one only sells cannabis, the other one wants to sell you other things but has to sell tobacco because of it.
Good point. I think that if we're going to continue with the tobacco initiative, certainly cannabis moves into a whole different realm, and maybe the direction we need to send back to the city administration to take a look at that. And specifically, because the cannabis store, if I understand correctly, will only be able to sell cannabis and associated accessories, is the terminology that's referred to. Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. That was the question I had, is the original draft of that said that it was cannabis and cannabis only, that they couldn't sell anything else related to it, which was a concern of one of our presenters at a previous GPC, that he wasn't going to be allowed to have his other products that could be associated with it in the same licensing location. So I was unclear as to whether that is the case or is not.
I'll ask the city clerk to clarify.
That's, so the use or the sale of cannabis, while we'll license it and we'll set up within our land use bylaw the parameters in which it can exist, the sales operation occur within the confines of that building are regulated by the provinces. They're not within our purview.
So, to answer your question, it's provincial regulation that we follow. Okay, Councilor Dutchek.
Number 5, do the spell check on the exemptions. You got that one. The other one's around farmers markets. And we chatted with you about that, but it's, if you're a vendor and your host that hosts the market buys one license, and then anybody else can come in there if that person who has the license lets you. So what happens if the guy says, I don't want Jonathan in there because, you know what, he's going to compete with me? How are we setting this up? Like, do we want to police it? And maybe we don't, but I mean, I currently have a couple of farmers markets already, and there's, you know, certainly there's conversations about how they're structured, whatever it is. Is this licensing contributing to something that is leading us to have this, or is this licensing, you know, do we reduce the cost and everybody pay $10 and then you buy the fee, you can go there? Or, but I mean, I get it, there's some of the hosts that, with the Olive Tree now, I think Glenn will be able to speak a little better, but you can go in and be there and not have to pay a fee, but someone needs to help me out.
But even if you're a home-based business, you still have to have a business license. Even though they're going to this farmer's market, they still do have a business license within our community. Is that not right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That would be correct as well.
Yeah.
And with the farmer's market, so any vendor at the farmer's market is covered under the organizer of the farmer's market business license. That was a change initiated to, that's current practice right now in the current business license bylaw. That's been in effect for about 2 years, I believe. Sorry, three years. I'm not aware of any current issues. I don't know if you've been approached. And
No,
I don't know how to address
I'm
it.
just looking at the structure and how it's working, but I mean, we have a farmer's market over on Highway 16, we have another one at Service, and we have one at Olive Tree, and some of the people are the same, and at times I wonder why, you know, we have everybody sort of going in different directions, and how it's, I guess part of it for me is that if the one person has the major license, they also have control over me as well. So I guess the choice is then buy your own license, and then where do you sell your products? So like I said, if there's an issue where, you know what, Stephanie's got the license and she says, Michael, you can't come in and I don't want you to get lost. Now, and really the only place I want to sell is where she's selling it, I'm out of business, I can't do my job.
We can reach out to some of the.
It's just the potential exists the way it's structured.
Any other comments?
Well, just for clarification though, if you have a home-based business, you do still require under our bylaw to have your own business license, correct?
That's correct. If you have a home-based business, then
Right.
you're required to go through land use process and have a business license.
Right.
But we don't require everybody who's at the farmer's market to have a home-based.
Right,
Business
and
license.
even if you sell Tupperware, you should have a home-based license, right? Is that correct? We do encourage that. It's just whether or not it's enforced, but it is encouraged.
It is encouraged. It's at what level do you capture these things?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not familiar with how the farmer's market licensing works, and I've
This is
never
all
had an issue. I've traveled to a couple of them, and I haven't.
Well,
heard
Stephanie
any-
won't let me sell, so I'm bringing it to, like,
Okay. Well, I
it's
appreciate
possible.
It is possible, there's no question about it. Any other comments on the draft business license?
And I have a license.
All right, thank you, Dan. Moving on to 5.4, you're not getting away that easy. We're moving on to the draft community standards bylaw.
Yes, thank you again. Again, this bylaw was just amended to reflect cannabis, just a formatting update. We've also added an addition to clear your sidewalks within 48 hours as opposed to the current 72. Again, any questions for council?
Councillor Buckingham.
I was clearing my sidewalk this morning, so I have this question. I'm also clearing my neighbor's sidewalk. How do we enforce that? I'm gone for a week. It snows like it did on the weekend. How are we supposed to go and enforce the fact that they're gone? Are we now saying that when I'm gone, I need to have somebody prepared to shovel snow at my house?
Sure.
Is that what we're asking?
Currently, right now, Councillor, we ask that you do it within 72 hours, and if you're away, you should make arrangements to have somebody shovel your sidewalk, yes.
Probably arrange for it within 72 hours. I'm not sure I want to roll it back or change it.
And that's why the question is before Council.
Yeah, I would want to leave that.
Your Worship, I was asked this morning, you want us to shovel our drives, eh? And our walks, you want that done every 48 hours. When are you going to plow the streets you haven't done in this winter? How do you answer that question? Think about that one before you start bringing in some legislation.
I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Baker, from the perspective that there's, I don't want to get into the snow debate, but it's a good comparison. I think
I couldn't answer the question.
I had the same question for 72 hours. I think 3 days is a reasonable feat, certainly as a city, and I think we can talk about sidewalks starting with. We'd have a hard time being held accountable for the sidewalks on unsold properties that are numerous throughout the residential area, let alone the entire city area. As the city clerk indicated, I think this is where one of those issues, starting with snow, starting with the shoveling of sidewalks, everyone that owns a property has a responsibility for that, to shovel the snow and to shovel it onto their property, because the street leads to issues on the street when they shovel it onto that. And I think that communication that we need to work towards again next fall, going into another winter season, is to remind homeowners and residential owners and property owners that snow does not get shoveled onto the street, because it doesn't help your street one bit. It causes that problem. There's no question we need to have this discussion about snow removal. I think that'll come in due time. It won't happen at this committee meeting, but I think that we've all heard about it. It's a continuation. And again, I want to start with by having that conversation and the communication around what we do have. It's one of the challenges that we go through every year. You've been on this for a lot longer than most of us, and wintered it every time, I can believe. But from the perspective, people have an expectation, and I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to drag into the snow removal, because we'll go right off topic very quickly. But I think that the recommendation that I'm hearing from people is that let's leave it at 72 hours and hope that they can make arrangements. And Councilor Buckingham, when you do go away on vacation, hopefully you'll be able to find your neighbor reciprocating, shoveling your snow while you shovel his while he's away.
I'm just going to make sure that you're around when I'm gone. I'll ask you for a hand.
Certainly. I'll do my best. I'll have to look at my calendar.
I saw some pictures floating around social media of you doing other people's sidewalks. I'm going to take advantage of that.
You know, you can't believe everything you read on Facebook. Any other comments regarding the community standards bylaw?
There's a typo on number 18, I think it is, right at the heading, but I can't remember. But I guess the thing I was looking at is, when I mentioned earlier on the buildings and the potential for buildings that may be hazardous and have not been kept up. What teeth do we have behind this? I guess if I look at 4.2 H, so the failure to maintain the building structure improvement, including a fence so that it deteriorates, becomes unsightly and becomes a safety hazard. So who decides what unsightly is? Safety, I think I can grab.
So would, so those, whether it's unsightly or not, would be based on an investigation conducted by a peace officer or a bylaw officer. They would determine that whether a fence is falling down, whether it's in disrepair, whether it should be repaired, whether it's a safety issue or not. And then section 503 and 504 of the charter provide them the teeth.
So if we have buildings as a fallout where they're leaning and we suspect there may be danger, is that something where, what responsibility is it, what liability and responsibilities for the city, to ensure that we monitor the buildings to be in safe condition? Because someone could say, you had the bylaw, you didn't come over and enforce it, now it's fallen over, it's your fault. You're supposed to be watching it.
We are under no duty to actively enforce the bylaw. That's been proven out in court, so we would have no liability in that case. However, whenever we receive a complaint or if the officers are driving around, they do see the situation that is unsafe or dangerous, they do act.
Okay. Have we ever used this portion or section ever in the last 10 years? No?
Yes, as well.
I believe it's a typographical error, but I'm just asking you to review Schedule B under fines. When it reads bylaw 8.1, I think it's actually, should reference 9.1. When I was looking at the sidewalks, and I think it's been, we may have updated one piece and not the second piece, so just ask administration to check on that. There's a couple of examples that when I read 8.1, I think should be 9.1 based on what I was reading back that way. Certainly, yeah, and from the community standards bylaw, cannabis growing and processing doesn't need to be covered in the community standards bylaw that we're aware of today.
No, it would be a provincial regulated.
Okay. Councilor Monroe.
Just a comment on everyone else is okay with the 72 hours. I actually think the 48 hours isn't unacceptable. If you don't have to clean your driveway, they're just asking to clean your sidewalk, which is 50 feet. When I have 4 kids that have to walk to the bus stop, and they're trekking through that, and one who refuses to take the bus and walks all the way to school, I don't think it's unacceptable for you to have cleaned your sidewalk off. If you don't get out into your whole driveway, that's one thing, but there's also mail carriers, and if you're walking in a good foot of snow, 48 hours, that's 2 days. And if you're away on holidays, whether that person's there in 2 days or 3 days, I really think that it's not unacceptable to have a 2-day minimum just to clean your sidewalk. If you don't want to do your driveway, don't do your driveway. That's your own prerogative. But the 50 feet in front of your house, I don't think the 48 hours is unacceptable.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question, and I don't want it to turn into a discussion that it almost turned into a second ago, but I'm just curious about city lots, unpurchased lots. Is it the responsibility of the city then to clear all of the sidewalks on all those, the opening of the mouth on every single park, if it's not, on someone else's property? And, around schools and is it the school division's responsibility to do the sidewalks that are in front of schools, or is it city property? And just all of those ones that, just as far as holding people to the same standard that we're trying to achieve. So on the sidewalk side of things, are we going to logistically be able to clear all those sidewalks within the 48-hour period?
I'll look to the city manager to direct that to who he feels would be best to answer that.
My answer would be it's the responsibility of the property owner to clear the sidewalk. So we had this discussion, as my understanding, that we couldn't clear what we own within the allotment, but we will confirm that before we bring it forward.
And I only say that because I live in a newer area, and it gets very tricky. And, if you got an unpurchased lot, that's not going to be top priority, obviously, and it shouldn't be. But then there's still the requirement of it getting done at some point, and within 48 hours is ambitious, but It's good, perfect. If you can say you can do it, you can do it.
Councilor Baker.
The other question I have been asked many, many times, how we determine which sidewalks the city claims, I'm talking commercial properties. The city sometimes goes up and down Highway 17 3-4 times a day and does a great job of cleaning the highways, sidewalks. But there's a lot of commercial areas in the city don't get any service. And how do we make that determination?
I'll look to the city manager for review.
I don't have a map in front of me right now, but I'm guessing it's based on our priority or snow removal policy and how we would, how that was come to. I can get that answer for you, but I'm guessing it's based on a priority sequence that we would have within our snow removal policy and how we have each one.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for under draft community standards bylaw? I think other than a few spelling errors, mainly jumped out at, as I was reviewing as well, and the Councillor Dychak had mentioned a few of them, so it's just simply some cleaning up on some verbiage. But again, thank you, Dan. You've covered off a lot of the basis for what's been going on in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the Legislative Services, because I know you're not a one-man team, so thank you for your efforts. Would I like to ask Council for some direction on potential into recess for 5 minutes?
Also move for a 5-minute break.
Second, Council Baker, all in favor? We are recessed for 5 minutes. Council
Motion
Diak-
to go back in session.
Council Diak, seconder. Council Monroe. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to agenda, item 5.5 is planning and development preparation for cannabis legislation. I'll look to the city manager.
Amy Fee from Planning and Development will be presenting.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here today to provide the committee with information from the planning and development perspective on the upcoming legalization of recreational cannabis for a review, discussion, and direction. To present this information that pertains to the upcoming regulations of cannabis as it pertains to Land Use Bylaw 5/2016. The information provided contains proposed definitions for various forms of cannabis use classes, identifies special regulations that will assist in determining application submission requirements, as well as offering zoning districts where these cannabis use classes, sales and production will either be permitted or discretionary uses. Having a plan in place prior to legalization as to how we will incorporate these items in our bylaw will provide us for a smooth transition and will give us the authority and powers to regulate and enforce cannabis in Lloydminster. So I prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you all. It was in the agenda package. There have been some minor tweaks and changes to that since you received it, but we'll go through it. So in April 13, 2017, the Government of Canada introduced legislation to legalize, regulate, and restrict access to cannabis. This legislation is expected to come into effect by July of 2018, but we do know that this date has changed. It's now being proposed to be August or September 2018. So areas of responsibility, specifically on the municipality side, education, taxation, retail location and rules, public consumption, land use planning, and zoning. So the land use planning and zoning is more or less what I'm focusing on in this presentation. And we'll continue on. Alberta Framework Overview. So what we know is the minimum age to consume is 18. Minors will be prohibited from even entering cannabis stores, even with an adult. Retailers will receive products similar to alcohol through the Alberta Gaming and Liquor Corporation, and they will issue and set the terms and conditions for licenses as well as complete inspections. Cannabis can be sold at a location that sells liquor, tobacco, or pharmaceuticals, and the government will establish rules that will guide hours, which will be no earlier than 10 in the morning and closing no later than 2 a.m. Location of stores 100 meters from schools and provincial healthcare facilities, and the age and training of staff. So purchasing and consuming in Alberta will be through privately run retail stores subject to government regulations in terms of licenses granted by the Alberta Gaming and Liquor Corporation. Government operated online sales also regulated by the AGLC. Consumption will be in homes and public spaces where smoking or vaping is permitted. Smoking cannabis is banned in vehicles, cannabis retail outlets, and areas frequented by children and hospitals. There's no consumption within 5 meters of skate parks, spray parks, playgrounds, or outdoor pools. Continuing with Alberta Framework, Promotion, Marketing, and Labeling, they'll follow federal regulations as set out in Bill C-45. So advertising and promotion of cannabis and accessories is prohibited except in limited circumstances much like tobacco and cannot be appealing to youth. No false or misleading or deceptive promotion. No sponsorship and endorsements, no depictions of person, celebrity, character, or animal. Packaging and labeling restrictions are similar to tobacco and cannot be appealing to youth. No false or misleading information, no lifestyle elements or branding, must use plain packaging, and health warnings like tobacco, and restrictions on the display of cannabis and cannabis accessories at the point of sale. The Saskatchewan Framework was just released on March 14, 2018. We know that the minimum age to consume is going to be 19 years old. The Saskatchewan Liquor and Gaming Association will issue up to 51 retail cannabis permits in 32 communities, and 2 of those are Lloydminster. The selection process is underway for the retail permits, and licenses will be issued in a 2-phase selection process. The detailed requests for proposal are available on Sask Tenders right now. Purchasing and consuming in Saskatchewan. So consumption is 19 or older to consume or purchase. Maximum public possession is 30 grams per legal age consumer. It's illegal for minors to be in possession of cannabis, and it's a criminal offense through the Youth Criminal Justice Act for a minor to be in possession of more than 5 grams of cannabis. There's a zero tolerance for drugs and driving for drivers of all ages. consumption in the vehicle is prohibited. It can be transported from one location of legal consumption to another, but that's it. And there's 4 cannabis plants can be grown per household. Purchasing will be through privately run retail stores, a maximum of 2 in Lloydminster at this time, subject to government regulation in terms of licenses. And these stores will also be able to have online sales regulated through the Saskatchewan Liquor and Gaming Association. Promotion, marketing, and labeling is the same as Alberta. They're just going to follow the federal regulations set out in BC 45. Saskatchewan retail store requirements. Their retail operating requirements is a cannabis store must be standalone, selling only cannabis, cannabis accessories, and there's no cannabis edibles. Alcohol sales will not be permitted in alcohol stores or in cannabis stores. Cannabis retailers must operate a storefront and will also be able to sell cannabis online. Cannabis retailers must meet local zoning bylaws regarding location of their retail store, and all retailers must take mandatory social responsibility training prior to operating a business. Minors are not allowed in a retail store. Identification is required for all retail sales and deliveries, regardless of age, and retailers must follow record-keeping requirements as per license. So comparing Alberta versus Saskatchewan, so there's no license limit in Alberta. They anticipate about 250 licenses will be issued this year. 18 is the legal age of consumption, and the government will operate the online sales. In Saskatchewan, there's 51 licenses issued, 2 proposed for Lloydminster. 19 is the legal age of consumption, and private retailers with a storefront will be able to sell online product, and they must track and report all inventory. So considerations, we have some definitions, location, separation distances, and signage. There's a long list of definitions, so I won't go through them all, but we're looking at new definitions for cannabis, marijuana, cannabis accessory, cannabis retail stores, cannabis retail store major, and a minor. We've also added vaping lounges, cannabis-infused products, and commercial cannabis production program. Vaping lounges and infused products are not going to be legal at this time, but we wanted to have them in our bylaw to have a definition so that they could not fall under any other category. All of the definitions for the most part are just adding no cannabis retail sales or cannabis production and distribution is not allowed.
And
So proposed zoning districts for
can you just go back to that post-secondary education piece?
the production program?
Yeah, just there's reference. Okay, post-secondary education folks in greenhouse. Okay.
Yeah, it's becoming in Ontario and BC, I believe there's a couple schools dedicated specifically to how to grow cannabis. So we wanted to make sure that it did not fall under any type of private school for us.
Okay. Yep, good call.
Thank you, Andrew. Continue on.
Okay, so proposed zoning districts for us. Cannabis sales minor is going to be a retail space that's less than 2,000 square feet. It's going to be, permitted uses we're proposing for C1, C2, C4, C5, I1, and I2. So everything but your neighborhood commercial. Discretionary uses will be in our direct control districts. Most of those are retail stores anyway, so to keep them as discretionary there for the time being, we thought it would fit. Cannabis sales major is a retail space greater than 2,000 square feet, and we're allowing that permitted in both the light and medium industrial districts. Cannabis production and distribution facilities be permitted in I3 and discretionary in the I1 and I2. So why permitted versus discretionary? Cannabis sales have a similar land use impact as alcohol sales and other retail stores. The size of cannabis sales minor store can be no greater than 2,000 square feet, limiting locations in commercial zoning districts. Separation distance from parks, schools, community centers, and provincial health centers limit locations in the zoning districts. And additional conditions and submission requirements may be required by the development officer based on special regulations, location, size, etc. All approved development permits are posted at the City of Lloydminster Operations Center, giving 21 days for affected parties to appeal any decision. So proposed location, we do not have any applications. I would just wanted to give you an idea of what types of buildings these zoning districts fell in. So your light industrial, medium industrial, and heavy industrial. They're all discretionary for the production in the I-1 and I-2 and permitted in an I-3 type district. Cannabis retail store is major, greater than 185 meters squared, so light industrial and medium industrial. Again, examples only, there's no applications. Cannabis retail store minor, less than 185 meters squared. And we're doing a separation distance from parks and schools, community centers, and provincial healthcare facilities. The schools and provincial healthcare facilities are the only two that are actually required by the federal government. We've added parks and community centers to that buffer area.
Can we stop it for a second?
Sorry, just, does our community currently note, like, homeschools? Do we note that those would be, are we currently registering them with our community or no? That's not taken into consideration?
That is actually something we were just discussing earlier. We're going to look at what the definition is, the federal definition is for school, and see where they draw the line.
Just because I know there are some individuals that there's actually one person, but there'll be a few families that are being homeschooled by that one individual, right?
Right.
So is there a certain number of students that need to be there before it's classified as a school, or how does that work?
Yes, and we were literally talking about that this morning, so we will definitely get back to you with that information. We're curious ourselves as
Just because that would also affect our liquor bylaw, correct?
That's right.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I think that some of the legislations in each of the provinces will have, within each of the education ministries will speak to that, but I don't even know that they will go so far as to say that just because you're homeschooling, it becomes a school.
Right.
It becomes more of an operational piece as opposed to a definition. You don't automatically become a school just because you homeschool your children.
Right, no, absolutely,
So
but just so that we
that's a
have
good
that
question.
clarification, right?
Yeah.
So why 100 meters? To meet provincial and federal legislation, the Alberta framework has a 100-meter buffer from schools and provincial healthcare facilities. Saskatchewan framework has no buffer area, and having a buffer area may not provide any opportunities for small municipalities to have a retail store. The licenses in Saskatchewan are issued on the population of each municipality, a population of 2,500. The whole municipality may not be able to incorporate a cannabis retail store. So we also want to maintain opportunities across the city for cannabis stores to locate, as well as provide accessibility. In addition of a separation distance from park and recreation centers to the distance where children and youth gather. This buffer is not required in provincial and federal legislation, but we've added it. So here's kind of a map of, this is the 100-meter buffer area. Anything in the red color is within the no-go zone, leaving most opportunities on Highway 16 and 17, which is exactly where we'd like to see those types of sales, as well as the industrial areas.
So what percentage, can you give us a percentage of the community that would be, I guess, like what's the percentage of the red area compared to the percentage of the not red area?
I don't know the percentage, but we also have to keep in mind that on Highway 16 and 17, it'll also be the retail store minor, where the store has to be less than 2,000 square feet.
Right.
So you've got to remember that some of this encompasses there's areas in the residential area that's exempt, it's not. So even
Right.
from a percentage wise, that's where it becomes a little bit challenging.
Right.
For that percentage number.
So just to clarify, when you said you made a comment about Highway 17 and 16?
Yeah.
That you said that's exactly where you wanted them or didn't want them? I didn't.
That's where we would like to see
Okay.
them, as well as the industrial areas. We don't want them in the neighborhood commercial areas, away from residential, but accessibility-wise, and there is the opportunity for those stores to gather in on 16 and 17.
Gotcha.
So what's next for us? This is just some tentative dates. So March 22nd, their land use bylaw text amendment process begins. We're going to send out internal and external referrals, and there will be advertising to notify of changes and allow 21 days for feedback and comments. This is just general information like I'm presenting to you guys. It's not going to have any of the bylaw. We don't have the bylaw prepared yet, but just let people know what might be happening. From March 22nd to April 16th, we're going to start preparing the draft bylaw, send to legal for review, and prepare to bring the draft bylaw to council in April. April 16th, bring the draft bylaw to council for first reading. April 19th will be at the Your Voice for the cannabis framework and the draft bylaw. And then April 30th, possibly public hearing on the draft land use bylaw text amendment, as well as potentially second and third reading. Thank you.
Questions for Amy? Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the zoning, in the heavy industrial, that's a permitted use. Do we know I don't know anything about growing this stuff. I'm talking about the production side. Is there odors and stuff created by this stuff when it's grown?
Thank you, Mr. Baker, through Mayor. Actually, right now in our zoning bylaw, we actually have nothing zoned I3 heavy industrial. We're putting it in there to have in there. It is a zone in our bylaw, but we don't have anything zoned that at this moment.
So, Councillor, to answer your question, if I can, and I'm no expert by any means, again, from what I've read, there is a greenhouse. If you saw the operation, you wouldn't notice it any different than a greenhouse operation that was growing vegetables,
Okay, yeah.
tomatoes,
I have to
cucumbers.
make an appointment.
You would have to, and I'm not sure where the closest one is, but from what I understand, they're very well. They are extremely controlled because they are federally licensed and regulated. So you can't simply walk in the door of a greenhouse operation that's growing marijuana or cannabis grow operation that's licensed by the government. There's security, they'll leave the make gown up if you were able to go in because it's a very sophisticated operation.
Okay. I guess I got a couple more. On the, Alberta's wide open by the looks of it. They could have 50 stores in town if we let them have them, and 2 in Saskatchewan side, is that right?
That's my interpretation. I will look to city
Well,
administration,
that's what
but we go for 2 for Alberta. The government of Alberta is taking the position they believe there's going to be 250 retail stores in Alberta, and I believe they're awful light on that number, but that's what they are shooting for across the province. And there is no restriction that I've read anywhere about how many stores we can have on the Alberta side, up to the city clerk. And
The 250 number that Alberta has put forward is the base number, so they could calculate the 15% ownership, because the maximum anybody can own within the framework is 15%. So that's the number they started with. They said they expect that to expand and grow. Within the city itself, the limiter would be through our land use bylaw, whether we wanted the stores to cluster or not, those sort of things, and that's what we seek for direction today.
We could set the number or maximum amount of stores we wanted. City council could do that?
You would do it through the placement of the land use bylaw, so the distance.
Yeah,
between
well, whatever
stores.
the method
So
is.
it would, whatever method you used it through that. I
Pick
don't
the number,
believe,
say we wanted 5, max, or 10. It doesn't matter right now. Can we set that number?
I don't believe that we can set the number, but we can set the parameters that would limit it to that number.
Okay, so we're saying on April 10th. No, April 30th is when you want to have it all done by?
Yes.
Is that the date?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
the proposal.
Okay, what I'm afraid of, I don't think that number should, that final reading should come forward if we don't have all the information. We need to know everything there is to know about this before that final bylaw is approved.
Absolutely, and we would look for counsel for that direction, and if we had some questions, we could do a
Okay.
second reading and wait for the.
Just something to think about.
So
We're no wiser than we are today.
We still leave some information, Councillor, and it's a good point. As the city clerks mentioned, we can certainly give it a first reading.
Yeah.
Get this discussion, get the second reading, and the third reading would be when we are prepared to make that final reading. Any other questions, Councillor? Any
But
other
that's
questions?
good,
Yeah, Councillor Joseph.
Double them up.
Just to be clear, even if theoretically we did second and third reading on April 30th, there would still be a moratorium on until June, which we could then continue if we don't have all of our ducks in a row. Correct?
Just to be clear, even if we get these bylaws in place, sales of cannabis is not legal until such time as the federal government gives its final reading in August or September, as we understand now. So we would just allow people now to get their storefronts in place, but they would not be able to sell cannabis until such time as the federal government made it legal.
And I had one other question, and this was just around limiting. Is it possible to limit the number of business licenses you sell? To put a cap on, we sell X number of business licenses, or is that not a thing that you can do?
I wouldn't know how defensible that would be. I'd have to run that question past our next department.
Councilor Baker.
Your Worship, I was under the understanding we didn't have to allow any stores.
I'll take this.
2 months ago, we said we didn't have to.
Well, I believe certain cities.
So Saskatchewan Alberta has not given us that opportunity. Alberta has said there's 250 licenses, your land use bylaws will direct other place. Saskatchewan did provide an opportunity for communities to opt out. Council was advised and determined that they would allow those two sorts. That's Saskatchewan. Alberta hasn't given that opportunity to opt out.
The other part, and Councilor Jonathan brought it up, don't approve those bylaws until you know where you're at. Once they're approved, they're approved. Be careful.
Absolutely, Councilor Batchel.
Yeah, and the other part of this is that we're somehow assuming that we're going to have one or two. With 250, it's possible that people want to be in larger centers, we may have none. So, I mean, seriously, because if you figure this out, I think using liquor stores as a case in point as an example, people may not even be interested here. I don't think that's likely, but it's possible with 250. People look at the places where it's easiest to get in, build, get going. So I mean, if we see this as an opportunity to sell businesses and have them in business, there's also the pressure from the other side to be ready.
I think, Councilor, I'm not sure if I'm understanding you clearly, there is the number they're targeting is 250. There is no limit in Alberta.
I think that what I heard was there's 250 until such time as they have a reason to expand it.
No, that's not what I understand.
Their base number of 250, as I understand from listening to what the ministers would say, is a base number they use to calculate with 15% ownership.
Oh, okay.
So they're saying that they feel that's an accurate number at this point, but it could extend.
I misunderstood that, sorry.
Yeah,
so
no,
it could actually be 260
or it could be 275 or whatever number after that point. Amy, if I can ask this question, as you were talking about things, you referred to in Alberta provincial health care facilities.
Yep.
Is a health care facility that's funded by people that use it by Alberta Health, but is not a provincial health care facility? What is that definition? So I just want to make sure that everybody is clear in the community, from both developers to property owners to businesses. Has the government been very clear on what a provincial health care facility is? Because if a facility receives payment from Alberta Health, is that a provincial health care facility?
I haven't seen a definition for a provincial healthcare facility. We took anything in Lloydminster that was owned and operated by Prairie North Health Region or Alberta Health Services.
I believe that's right, but I just I think that we might want to seek a little clarity from the Cannabis Secretariat in Alberta, just because if it's a doctor's clinic, is that doctor clinic is paid for by either Saskatchewan Health or Alberta Health. And we should be very clear on what is a healthcare facility, because it'll come down to splitting hairs here, I'm sure, sooner or later by somebody.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And go ahead, Councilor.
I had one other comment on this, and it's related to something I said earlier when I was talking about paying for the capital items that the city will have to pay for, so it doesn't go on taxpayers. Another thing in business, so you can limit competition, would be adding barriers to entry, such as very high business license fees. Theoretically, you could do that if you wanted to limit the number of stores. Have high business license fees, then only people with enough money to afford the business license fees can do it, therefore limiting the number of people who are doing it. And limiting the number of stores because it's less profitable to operate one, so you only have one or two rather than having 5 or 6 or 7.
It's certainly an option. I'll let the city clerk for some direction on that.
If I could offer some caution on that avenue, is if you're finding a way to make it prohibitive for somebody else, you may find that indefensible in the court. So you have to be very careful on where you set your levels.
Sure.
Thank you, City Clerk. Amy, one last one. The setback for parks and playgrounds in Alberta, 5 meters, is that what I understood, that for consumption?
Yes, outside 5 meters, so basically to a sidewalk.
So we can, that's where our bylaw of where what's permitted use would.
We've made that to 100 meters from parks.
Yeah, perfect. I just wanted to be sure because I saw the 5 on it and I thought, but yeah,
Yes,
that's where the provincial set out and we have the ability, because of the bylaw control, we have the ability to extend that.
Exactly.
So my colors are a little different than yours.
Okay.
So can you go to the map and with that red thing, point out where it would be acceptable to develop and put them in?
Where it would be
Yeah, so
acceptable,
where-
anything that's white.
Okay,
Again, inside C1, C2.
Yes.
And
because could we at some point in time have a
Yeah,
map
you're
that
kind of
says,
looking in this area
Okay.
and down here for the most part, because you've got residential all in these areas,
yeah,
and then you've got your industrial areas that you can
yeah,
be as well.
okay. Good.
Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. You know, it's an interesting thing. It's coming down federally, so it's coming, and regardless, there's nothing we can do about the legalization or not of it. What's interesting to me is that Lloydminster is open for business. We are a pro-business community. We want the opportunity to have more businesses, more people coming to town, so on and so forth. The cautionary piece of it for me is being open for business, but with this whole fairness on both sides of the border, we need to consider it. You know, if you can have 7, 8 of them open on the Alberta side and only 2 on the Saskatchewan side, I'm not sure that we can or want to control who goes where for what. But I think it's something we need to be real cognizant of to make sure that those businesses come here, they survive. And it's done as fairly as humanly possible. You know, I don't want to be one to restrict business in our city. I want it to be open but fair. So it's under this, we could have the most cannabis stores per capita in the country under the way this sits because of the border issue, where Saskatchewan is saying 2 only and Alberta is saying 250. Technically, we could have more than anybody else anywhere. Not saying we're going to, but it's possible. But I want to make sure that we do this as fair as humanly possible as well.
You're absolutely right, Councillor. It's something that's crossed my mind. We certainly see that with alcohol retail in the community, and certainly it's driven by the marketplace. So I suspect that, you know, the number the government of Alberta went with was 250 to start with, and as the city clerk alluded to, no one in Alberta will have more than 15% of the retail. But based on 250, what happens if there's 1,000? I'm not sure how the government's going to deal with that. But 15% is the number they attribute to. So one particular company or organization would have the most 37 stores, I believe, to start with. That's the 15%, and the math is right. So that's, they set out some guidelines that way. Each province, as we've seen across Canada, has different sets of rules. Ontario, I believe there's 150 stores for the entire province of Ontario. And Saskatchewan started at 60, so it's certainly, every province is different. And you're absolutely right. Again, as we talked about in some of the bylaws before, I think it's very important that we ensure, working with planning and development and setting that direction, is that we're trying to be as fair as we can be based on what provincial regulations are. And Saskatchewan, you can have 2. Alberta, we'll wait and see what the marketplace dictates, meeting our requirements to bylaw. Council back.
So I'm not clear, so what does fair look like?
I don't know. It's a great question.
So,
But-
what I'm just, I'm trying to understand what you're saying, so you need to help me out.
Well, I'm looking at it going, okay, so if you own a property in Saskatchewan, a retail space in Elwood, there's 2 opportunities to lease out to somebody,
Okay,
right? On the Alberta side, you're still in our city, you own 7 properties. You could lease out all 7. You know, there's a ton of different angles to this, but
so do we retrofit it to alcohol
that's what I don't know. I mean,
then? Well,
I just-
I guess the challenge is that if you want to manage it and control it, I would suspect it would be back to the clerk's comments, is that if you're perceiving as treating one industry different than the other, you don't have too much of a leg to stand on.
No.
And so I'm trying to wrap my head around what that would look like.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing we run into over and over again with the border, right? It's an opportunity and it's also sometimes a little bit
It's
difficult.
goofy.
Well, I think that we have to remember, as we know, the provincial government, start with the federal government in this case, they've legislated cannabis is legal. There's no getting around in this country, that's across the board. And each province has the ability to set their rules. You know, the discussion that we're having could revolve around any other industry that's controlled by government. So in the case of alcohol sales, there's one store on the Saskatchewan side, and they went with that. So if they set to in Alberta, it is driven by the marketplace. And that's the conditions, as long as I've heard, we do not impede what business comes to town. And I think that's the message we want to send, is we're not here to impede. We simply want to make sure that businesses that come to town everyone is on the same level playing field, and it applies, the rules are across, and that's why we've had inquiries from different businesses, the city manager and myself, and the same information has been shared with everybody. And you'll be brought abreast of the bylaws once they are in force. We have a moratorium in place. We're treating everybody the same way. No one, I believe, can say they have a leg up on anyone else on the retail of cannabis in the city of Lloydminster, because we're ensuring that we're trying to do this right the first time and ensure that we are across the board as even as we can be. With the border that exists, we can't be even, but that's not our responsibility, that's a provincial responsibility. So I think that's why the bylaws and the discussion we're having today is so important, to ensure that everybody will have that opportunity to voice their concerns, voice their interests, and see where that falls out from that point on.
Pricing is set federally, right? Pricing of cannabis is set federally?
Yes.
So that's the one difference from an alcohol retailer,
Yeah.
right? Is that is fair for Saskatchewan or Alberta in our case, because the pricing is the same. You're going to convenience in this case, most likely, right? Liquor stores can set whatever price they want, for the most part, right? So that is one thing that keeps it even, no matter which side of the border you are on.
And because it's a federal regulation on legalization, it does even out versus alcohol, where it is controlled more at the provincial level. Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Did you just said that the Fed's going to set the price? Like it's being grown all over, or will be grown all over?
So the federal government, if I understand correctly, again,
Now, what do you mean the price? Is that the wholesale price or the retail price? Or
both, I believe. The retail price for sure is being set at the federal government at $9 a gram, I believe, is the number I've heard.
Because liquor's not that way, right?
No, it isn't. It isn't, because
There's a wholesale price, is the thing.
there's a wholesale price, and it varies.
Because this is coming out of an Alberta or Saskatchewan warehouse somewhere.
It could go, yeah, and it could be grown somewhere in Canada.
So the retail, there's no competition.
Well, there is. It's the retailer will be choice. It'll be a set price at the retail. But whatever that retailer is, it'll come up to the choice of retailers. It'll be like gasoline, actually. As you've noticed, it seems to tend to follow the same price in most cases. So you'll have a favorite brand, as they say, or whatever term they use. I'm not familiar with that. So,
Yeah, in Edmonton, I think Councillor Scott McKean made a comment about how they asked him whether or not they're going to get it perfectly right, and he said the answer is no. He said we're new, we're just starting, but we're going to do our best. And I think the information you provided really helps us get to the best that we can do based on what we know. And I think we'd be holding ourselves to a standard that's not realistic if we think we're going to get it perfect right out of the gate. Everybody in the country is learning on this one, and hopefully we learn quick and we make the best decisions we can and go slow as opposed to go fast. But I think as you heard today, I think there are a lot of different discussions from licensing to distribution to what's fair to all those pieces that just because frankly we don't know a heck of a lot. It's our first time in it, so I thank you. It's good.
Thank you.
any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Amy. We look forward to having your voice tonight, because this will certainly bring out some conversations.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5.6, draft procurement and purchasing policy. With the city manager.
From our operations department, Michelle Sammer will be presenting.
Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Here presenting the draft procurement and purchasing policy. This draft was brought forward to the January 22nd GPC meeting where some more information was requested, as well as some sections to be changed, outlined in the IR. Section 3, the definition of contra was added, plus 6.6 was added to ban any form of contra in the procurement process. Section 5, the guiding principles from the current policy were put back into the new draft. Section 13.6 was increased to a price component of 60% evaluation criteria for equipment purchases and 45% for all other purchases. Section 14, the change orders were, section was reworded to provide a clear understanding. Section 15.6 was reworded as well to provide a clear understanding with regards to how it integrates with our new GP software. Section 15.8 was added to address what we do if a tender comes in over budget. Section 16.11 was added to address reoccurring or progress payments. And the last change was qualification-based selection was added to the definition of an RFX.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions or comments for Michelle? Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Worship. I just had a comment that it looks like it got cleaned up nicely and is probably as close to perfect as what we've got right now. So that's, I didn't see any issues when I read it this time around. So it's good.
So I'd like to bring, there's a couple little tweaks I would like to see. In 16.3, the chart based on dollar value for authority goes from basically, it starts at the bottom lowest to highest. And the chart on 6 being 3, which I believe is supposed to follows the signature, is the exact opposite. So from that perspective, it just seems like the order is changed from lowest to highest on 16.3, whereas the other side, council being at the highest level down.
Oh, so just flip the table.
Yeah,
Okay.
just flip those tables. 15.8, I wrestled with this one a little bit. The capital purchase, the capital project is tendered and comes in over budget. How do we deal with that? And I would like to see a little bit more wording around that from that perspective to clear it up, because as a capital purchase, we went through and itemized 123 capital purchase items, and I think we need to put some clarity around that. I think I understand the intention was if there was some savings that it would make sense, but I think we need to describe it either by division, department, group, however that budgetary amount is from that perspective. I think it could use a little bit of work. That's my thoughts around that one.
Yeah, I want to chime in. I forgot about this, and we talked about it before, and I guess maybe I'm not headed in the right direction, but I guess part of this for me is we had 123 capital items, and we had savings on 10 of them or 15 of them. That funding should go back in for number 124 or 125. It just means that we can stretch the dollar further. Is that kind of what this that you're getting at here?
Well, that's what I'm looking for, some clarity myself, because certainly there's going to be times, from what I understand, when we went out and did a request for quotation or planning, as our departments did and our staff and administration did, they went out and got a number. That number may have been low or maybe high. We always like the high number because then we'll come in under budget, but if it was by chance low, where does that variance money, if money is saved within a department, which we appreciate very much, you're absolutely right, can we deliver other capital projects, or does it help out projects that haven't been, we may not have got the budget number quite right? And I think that's the clarity we need to send to administration after we understand what they're looking for and put that direction to it so that the money is properly accounted for. Budgeted items don't always come in on budget, and what direction are we sending administration on that? I think it needs to be very clear, because I don't want people to think that we gave a department X number of dollars total when the number of items they wanted, and some are over and some are under. That wasn't the intention. I think we The intent was to drive it down to a price per item, because if something comes in $25,000 more than we budgeted, now we need to have that conversation, I think, between administration and council. Is that item really needed to, or do we need to budget again? Do we need to look for another option that way? Because I think at the end of the day, we're trying to stay within budget, and if we can come in under budget, that would certainly be my direction that I'd like to see, rather than come in over budget.
So if I'm hearing correctly, is that, when we, let's pick a magic number of 100 million, it's not, whatever the number is, let's say it's 20 million in capital projects, and some will be over and some will be under. Any capital dollar that's involved in the capital budget should stay in there, because really, for those that are over, where do we get it from? Well, from those that are under. So any capital dollar remains as a capital dollar within the capital dollar plan. Is that what we do now? And sorry, it's not, probably not to you. Yeah.
I think the intent of this one is around when we do have, say, project one is over 10,000, and instead of it coming back to council, if it's within $10,000, that ELT would have, the executive leadership team would have the ability to look at the other capital projects and make a decision to see if there is other money. If this isn't the intent that the executive leadership team would have new money to spend, that's not the intent of this. So that within the existing capital budget, that we would be able to allot anything under $10,000 from another project that may have come in under budget. If the project's over $10,000 over budget from what was presented within that year's budget, it would have to come back to council for approval.
Okay, so I guess from the one thing I wouldn't mind seeing as a statement in here then is that something that what I really identify, and I'm not sure, I think it belongs in here too, I guess, but is that the capital dollar stays capital dollars.
Yeah.
Within the context of this. And again, I think there's a place based on what I heard here, but I don't know, what do the rest of you think?
I think that's very clear from my perspective, Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of years ago, what was happening, the capital budgets were getting changed without council being informed. And council passed a motion asking the administration to just tell us, and we'll approve it for you, but what's so good about that? Say you budget $3 million for 2 blocks of sewer and water, and you do it for $2.9 million. You got $100,000 there, and it gives you more history for next year. And you probably do that internally. But council wasn't aware of that, and if you looked at our financial documents that we're getting, every month the capital project price was changing on different projects. And so I said, what's going on here? How did that capital get changed every month? So I think you're doing that now, Don, right? Especially your engineering side. Your Worship?
Well, I'll take a run at that. I think, Councillor, we've got progress payments being made, and we're seeing capital money spent, but I think at the end of the day, I think the point being, and I think I'm on the same track, is if there's money saved, we'd appreciate knowing that.
And overruns the same.
And overruns are the same, and this is where this policy, some of this policy comes from, is to help ensure, because we would like to have that ability to help give some direction to where that money goes.
It's transparent.
And it's very transparent. I think that's the absolute imperative part of this, is that ensuring that we don't want to hinder the operations from capital purchases and doing capital work, but at the same time, I think it's very clear that if we can save capital money, the question of where it needs to be spent needs to come back to council with direction from administration. But the administration, I'm sure, has a list longer than my arm of items that have been cut in the past that they feel could be moved up. Or, as you indicated, if the capital project, once we get into it, and somebody goes, oh my goodness, we missed it by $50,000 and it's going to be outside that 10% realm, administration should not be afraid to bring that back to this council, because we all have been there. We've all been in cost overruns, but it's our preferred not to be, but if we do, then we'll deal with it accordingly at this council.
Yeah, just to put some more clarity into that, Councillor Baker is absolutely correct. In the past, common practice was the capital budget was set at X, whether that was 20 million, 60 million, or whatever. As capital projects came in, if they were under budget, administration had a process where we reallocated capital funds to other projects. What this new policy is doing is bringing that rating in, so that everything that is over $10,000 in overage in budget is coming back to this council for approval to allocate those funds to those projects. So this policy really zeroes that down. It still gives us a little bit of flexibility. Anything under $10,000, we have the flexibility to reallocate, but over that, it would be over.
Councilor Baker?
Well, I totally understand that. You're doing sewer water projects and you run into some extras. Until you got the reconciliation of that account, you might not realize you're over by $20,000. So you've already spent the money. I mean, you had to finish it. No, that's not my argument. It's just saying, we had to do this because of that. And then it's transparent. That's the...
There are some cases where we've gone through a project and expended the money and needed to come back to council for approval for money already spent. We need to improve that practice in the field so that when we are tracking our project costs as the project is occurring, if we're noticing that we're going to be expending more than the budget, that we would be coming back to council at those times for those approvals. And that's through the change order process and project management for our capital work.
That's it. Councilor Flores?
Yeah, the way I see it, this policy is very much dealing with all of the scenarios as it is, especially when you get around, so this one that you guys are talking about specifically, where if the project's over, then it goes back to council within a certain threshold. And then I would expect in a scenario, and then because of that, if every other project was perfectly on budget, that meant something got, either we had to take extra money or, came out of reserve, something like that to pay for it, or something got cut off the bottom of the list in terms of what the priorities were. And then we would expect to know at some point that some things didn't make the list. I don't like the idea that if money's saved that you automatically go down to number 125 because that's not the budget that we approved. So it ought to be, if you save that money, it goes into reserve for next year. If that item is important enough, it makes it onto the budget the following year, and then it's a totally transparent process and something just doesn't get purchased without any oversight. So I'm very much of the opinion that this deals with all of those scenarios and deals with it well, mind you. There's still other opportunities, obviously, for comment. I just think that it's dealt with through this policy, and I would also appreciate, if I understand this correctly, that if you have a whole bunch of projects that, or several, I think I stated it all. I'm good. I nailed it.
Thank you.
So there's two issues, and I think you're right. One around procurement, I think this grabs it. I think what we're trying to do is talk about how we deal with reserves, our capital funding and how we spend it. And so they're different, and perhaps it needs to be dealt with in another spot. But I think the sense of it is, I'm not saying we do 124 the next one automatically, because what we do here is that some projects go over, some go under, and that it rationalizes within the context of that budget.
So just to so then let's say a hypothetical situation where you have one go over and then another one goes over, or one goes under, then one goes over. You don't automatically spend that on that other item and get to an upgraded truck with leather interior. If it's $10,000 more for that vehicle than what you budgeted, it would have to come to council for their approval, and everything's transparent, everyone sees everything that's happening.
And even if it's under the 10,000 allocation and ELT does approve it, section C states that regardless of what they approve underneath that 10,000 still has to be brought back.
116.5, we talk about any contract procurement and purchase over 200,000. I'd like to add total value shall only be awarded and approved. So it just puts a little more clarity to that if no one has too many objections. And lastly, Schedule A. I wrestled with this a little bit. I know it's in the sole source from the perspective under capital items that kind of concern me. I'm hoping that most capital, if not all capital items, we should be able to get 3 bids for. I read something, I apologize, I don't have the exact spot under capital items under Schedule A that it refers to purchasing, but I'm hoping in most cases that we can get 3 bids on a capital purchase.
Do we have examples where that's the case? Because I'm just thinking if you're, for instance, some of the computers that I had, I can only buy Dell.
Yeah.
Right? So I guess I'm wondering, if there are examples, then let's not shut the door on those as well?
No, I'm sure there isn't, but I guess I'm hoping it's the exception is that we get only 1 bid rather than city manager or Michelle.
I think a good example would be in a busy construction year where you're doing a renovation to a building or or something small like that, where nobody has the time, or, sometimes you might only get 1 or 2 bids. That might be, some examples like that, but you're buying equipment for the most part, as long as the specs are reasonable, I think you can get the bids. But there's some very busier times, sometimes getting contractors is more challenging. And just to confirm, your capital money will stay within capital projects. I'm not sure if we answered that question for you.
No, I think so.
And the theory behind, like in the industry behind sole source and single source, is that it's for very specific cases. You don't run to it, you use it as little as possible. It's there as a safeguard.
It's the safeguard or the last resort.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's good to hear. Any other questions for Michelle? Thank you very much, Michelle. I think we're very, very close. Just a slight tune-up, but I think you'll be ready to, you'll be there. Thank you. 5.7, draft aquatic allocation policy to the city manager.
I'll ask Joel.
Yeah, that's fine.
Or do you want me to do that?
It is quite a stretch. So, I am going to step out for this, but I just want to make it clear that it's quite a stretch for me even to have to step out. But I do have 2 children that are on one of the recreational clubs that does rent space from the Bioclean Aquatic Center, as well as friends on the other spectrum. So I just don't want there to be any conflict of interest, and then this way it just kind of sets me aside and I don't have to deal with anything.
Don't get yelled at by the pool parents.
Welcome, Joel and Mary. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon to your worship council. Mary Price and myself are here to present the draft aquatics allocation policy. Mary will kind of go through some of the challenges that we have at the Bioclean Aquatic Center first, and then I'll come back and talk to you more about the draft policies. I'll let Mary.
Thank you. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. So currently at the Bioclean Aquatic Center, we have an instructional pool which refers to the 6-lane flat pool. So this pool is allocated out to swimming lessons, user groups, special events, and aquatic programming. Currently, the allocating of these lanes is based on historical use. So typically every year, the user groups get the same lanes, the same times throughout each year. So this process of allocating lanes has created the following challenges. There is no opportunities for recreational swimming during prime time hours. So from Monday to Friday, from about 6 to 8, there is no lanes for public use at that time. There is unequal distribution of prime time hours versus non-prime time hours between user groups. So currently we have 3 swim clubs that utilize the facility. There's 2 fall and winter and 1 summer. One of the winter user groups have brought to our attention that they don't feel like they're getting fair, equal access to the pool during prime time. And then there's unable to fill public demand for all users. So the facility schedule, the Bioclean Aquatic Center is open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday to Saturday and 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Sundays. So this chart shows the total allocated lane hours during a typical fall-winter week. So this is everything from the timeline that I specified that's open. So we have about 222 hours for lane swim, there's 80 hours for public swim, 74 for aquatic programs, 20 for school programs, and there is, let's see that one, but 90 for these 4 user groups. So this is for the instructional pool only. And then we'll take a look at the prime time hours. So this is prime time hours would be Sunday from 10 to 6, Monday to Friday from 5 to 9 p.m. and Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. So this just shows the difference of hours that's allocated. So we have 15 to aquatic fitness, we have 55 hours to lane swim, there's 37 and a half hours to public swim, 52 hours to aquatic programs, and 62 hours to sport user groups. Based on a public survey completed in 2016, done through our cost recovery strategy, the main activity the public participates in at the Ballacooan Aquatic Center is recreational swimming and swimming lessons. 707 people completed this survey. It is important to note that the sport user groups was not an example to select as to why you're using the facility. So that's a little bit on the history, and I'll give it over to Joelle.
Thank you. So as you heard, some of the current issues, challenges that Mary brought, our proposed draft policy, there's no way we could fix everything at the Aquatic Center. We only have limited lanes, and we have a lot of people that want to use it. So our purpose of this policy and procedure is to create a fair and equal booking policy for the Ballacooan Aquatic Center based on priority. With this policy, facility bookings will align with public demand for recreational swimming, aquatic programs, and needs of the sport user groups. Our objective is to provide a fair and transparent aquatic facility allocation process for all users. So the Ballacooan Aquatic Center has several stakeholders. The draft policy has 7 recommended priorities for bookings. I just want to go through some of those. So priority 1 would be special events. So these are major special events and minor special events. So major special events would be like a Saskatchewan or Alberta Winter Games, a Nationals, provincial, something like that. Minor special events would be more local club competition or local club trying to do an event to increase numbers, that kind of thing. Priority number 2 would be recreational swimming. So this is the public accessing for lane swimming and for a healthy lifestyle. Priority 3, aquatic programs. So through the diverse programming offered at the Ballacooan Aquatic Center, residents are able to learn and develop critical knowledge and skills relating to water safety. Participation is open to people of all ages and abilities. Priority number 4, the youth pool user groups. These are the competitive and recreational swimming programs. Groups must be affiliated with the appropriate national or provincial sport governing body. Priority 5, these are school bookings. These are mostly during the day, almost entirely during the day actually. 2 types of bookings really that schools make. Either they get classes in for swimming lessons or that kind of thing, or their pool parties usually at the year of the end, that kind of thing.
Council?
Can you go back to 4, please? So the youth pool user groups, we're talking Vortex Stingray, is that type of user group? Just kind of caught my attention. Sport governing body being good standing and registered as a non-profit society. Are those groups
Almost, I'm not sure about those ones, but almost all sporting groups now have a non-profit organization.
I just wondered if that's in the policy. It's pretty stringent.
I guess it's to do with an organization, right, rather than someone simply calling themselves the Vortex City Swim Club. It comprises of X number of people based on history is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, my concern there is, of the current user groups now, in this priority 4 category, do we know if those user groups fit that criteria now?
I do know that they are registered with the sport governing body, so they have member fees, and they do not allow their swimmers into the water unless they have paid their fee, because it's an insurance liability for the swim clubs. As for them having a registered number, I'm not 100% sure if they have a registered number, but they've all classified themselves as being a nonprofit.
Yeah, because what I was concerned about is the current user groups that are there all the time. Having that wording in there, does it exclude somebody, limit somebody currently? Because that
and that could be information that we would definitely gather before we were to go forward with it.
Yeah, I would want to know that.
If I could, and it's a good point, Maurice, because I know that I'm working with 2 other groups We were discouraged initially to go down the nonprofit group pathway. We anticipated granting and all this other stuff, and they said, yeah, but the amount of time and energy you have to put in, have your books audited and all the costs that you have in there, it's quite significant. So I don't know if you can comment more on that, Jonathan, I don't know.
Yeah, I've never done books for a sport club, so I've never
But if
seen
you
had
have-
to do an audit, so maybe there's a waiver of audit because they have no assets. I don't know, but I'm not sure that they would normally be registered not-for-profits. I don't know.
We could check with the swimming groups. I can tell you that most sporting groups are getting registered non-for-profit because most grants require that. So whether they are, most sporting groups are changing into that.
Because what we did is we went under the umbrella of the provincial organization, so that way we're covered. So we could still have access to the grants, but then we were just an affiliate to the provincial group and didn't have to have our own independent status. So that might be.
Yeah, basically what I don't want personally is if we're already having trouble getting these groups in place and user time that they require, and then we put this there, and one of those groups is automatically excluded because they don't have that, then we have a much bigger problem than we currently have.
Well, I think Joel does.
Yes, that wasn't our intent.
We heard about those pool parents, right?
You have a much bigger problem, so it's going to become our big problem.
Councilor Baker, do you have a question on that?
I was just wanting to interpret number 4. Are those swim clubs,
There's two in
referring
the
to number 4 as swim clubs?
swim clubs, that's right.
Well,
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about.
yeah. Youth pool user groups are swim clubs.
Okay, thanks.
Some are swim, some are synchronized swimming, so,
No, that's okay, I just
absolutely.
wanted to identify them as being the same.
Please continue, Joel. Thank you.
Thank you. Priority 6 would be private rentals. So private rentals almost always are after hours. We've had a few, we don't have a lot, but for instance, the Youth Council had a private rental a few months ago, I believe. Administration has researched many aquatic facilities. Many of them, like us, are trying to balance between several different stakeholder groups and trying to do it similar to us. Many of these municipalities have different priorities for bookings, best ensure. So I showed you the list of the 7 priorities that we're recommending. Almost every single one has some slight variation in them. Research has shown that many of the facilities do allocate lanes for public swimming. The allocation process. So I just want to take you a few steps of how this allocation policy would work. There would be 2 distinct seasons. There's fall and winter, and spring and summer. The manager of aquatics will decide on bookable time space for user groups per the policy's priority listings. An allocation meeting between the pool manager and user groups will meet to discuss use of available time. So Mary will take that prioritization, look at her facility schedule, decide which times or dates should be for user groups, and then meet with those user groups. During that meeting, user groups are able to trade and negotiate with each other to ensure fairness between the groups. Should user groups not reach a consensus and agree with them, the manager will allocate the times by random lottery.
Just a quick question. Is the volume of like swimmers different from one user group to another that you would have to do like staffing changes or anything like that for number of lifeguards?
No, currently both of those groups have about the same amount of people in them. So I mean, I think it would depend on how many people are in the pool staffing, but I would guess that they're all the same, Mary?
Yeah, like we've never had to staff up, just unless they have a special event.
Yeah, I was just trying to grasp whether trading is practical, and it sounds as though it is. Perfect.
So options for a committee to move forward with. Committee requests administration to bring pool allocation to next council meeting for decision, or committee requests administration to bring an amended pool allocation to the next GPC meeting. That concludes our presentation. Mary and I are more than welcome to answer any questions you may have.
Councilor.
Your worship, I just have one. You've met with all these groups?
we've met with them in the past, yes, and we've told them that we were doing an
And they've
allocation.
seen this?
They have not seen this.
I'm just suggesting, you might sit down and talk to them before you bring it back. Just worth the bullet holes. You know? Might be worth, you could talk to the city manager about that.
Executive Director Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Would be a good idea, once we kind of have an understanding of where council's labor is around it, we wanted council to be very well aware of what we're proposing. The biggest thing in the policy that we would like council to provide some direction or clarity on is around the priorities that have been set. Like Joelle had indicated to earlier, municipalities set those priorities different. This is what we feel our priorities should be within our community, and we're open to council's consideration for that.
Good answer.
If I can add, Don, the other thing I think that's important to note is, in the past, it's always been historical based. And like Mary said, so what that means is, if one group had Monday to Friday and all the prime times, that's how it was. This is a big change to where they have to start getting along and deciding themselves who gets what. Of course, if one group gets all the prime time or gets a lot of the prime time, they might not like this policy, where the other group probably would like better like this.
Councilor Diachuk and then Councilor.
So what I'm gathering is that somebody's going to be a loser at the end of this policy from where they are currently. Let's put it in positive terms. So there's going to be a correction to the use and how it's distributed.
This policy is meant to make sure that both aquatic groups, or all three aquatic groups, have fair times. It is the main purpose of this, yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
Councilor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I trust that you guys can handle like rejigging this to make it a little more equitable. I'm just wondering if you kind of rotate things according to seasons. You said you've got several seasons, so if you have two main swim clubs, can they just one have the awesome hours one part of the year, and the other one have the awesome ones the other part of the year, and more or less most people are happy? Or is it because there's a third party who also wants in that mix that that's just not possible, as well as public lights? So I guess at the end of the day, when I look at this, I'm not really sure what council is approving either than the priority list, because I don't know where we land on primetime hours. So are we taking away from those clubs so that, you know, residents can swim during primetime hours rather than these swim clubs? Because when we set priorities like that, I'm really not sure in terms of a schedule what we're getting out of it. Thanks. I'm just confused.
There's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I don't think it's to change what is currently being done. I think it's a fair, equal process for the user groups that are currently there. So we're going to start from scratch. These are the blocks that we have available, so say from 6 to 8, Monday to Friday, Saturdays from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Sundays from 5 to 8. Those are different times that they currently use the pool. So it's just to start from scratch. These are the hours we have, and then let's work together so that we can get everybody in as a fair way. Because currently right now, one of the winter sport user groups has 6 lanes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whereas the other sport user groups, the only time that they have 6 lanes booked is on Sundays. So they don't feel like that's fair, because as a user group, they're having to come in on weekends, not able to grow their sport because it is on weekend time.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess, and that's I understand that that's really the heart of the issue. My only confusion is if we set priority in order where recreational swimming is more important, or it's a higher priority than group swim, does that mean primetime hours are actually dedicated to recreational swim? Like, just by setting it as a policy that way, we're saying recreational swim is a higher priority, so should we make it primetime hours?
Maybe it's equal.
It could be equal, but it also could be that because the groups are wanting more. So they're wanting more and more and more. So they're wanting to possibly come in on a Saturday afternoon, which is a really prime time for a public swim. So that would kind of where this priority list would come into play, where I can say, hey, you know what, this is a really busy time for us. How about we can allocate you these lanes that isn't a less prime time?
So if I'm getting this correct, even if you looked at the week and you said, okay, this is our class 1, and that's Saturday during the day, it's got to be recreational, it takes a higher priority.
a weekday in the evening is still high priority, but really it's a 2 compared to the 1 that is that Saturday afternoon, and that's what we're saying as far as making this priority list, correct?
Essentially, the policy gives administration the ability to set times that would be available for the user groups. So taking into consideration all the priorities, the amount of lane swimming we will need to provide to the public, because at the end of the day, our public pays for that facility, the same as our user groups, so we have to allocate some time for them. Administration would set a schedule for the user groups, and then the user groups would work with our facility manager to set the schedule that is fair and equitable to all parties looking for facility usage. So currently, we don't have that ability. We don't have a policy that says, here's the block of time we can give you. And currently, we have user groups that have been active longer than others and have secured a lot of the prime time. And the other user groups are trying to get fair and equitable pool time.
Okay.
So the policy allows administration to try and work with those user groups to create a fair, equitable use for the facility.
I'll leave it at that. I guess just, I think it's a little more clear now that regardless, we're setting a priority of which groups are kind of taking precedence one over the other in terms of how we block out our time, and we're probably going to categorize what blocks of time are most critical to ensure that those priorities get placed in, and from there you'll make it fair and equitable, and we get to have our hands off from there.
Yeah, one of the things we can do for council is when we bring it back to council again, we can bring a sample schedule of what we would be proposing based on the policy compared to what we are.
And even if that's, just having class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4 in terms of blocks of time, and then you guys divvy it up whatever's fair and equitable.
Your Worship, I actually think 5.2 needs to be done differently. And I think 5.2 suggests that that's the priority list for every day. And you describe your process, how you determine priorities, and I think those steps should be in there. So that allows you the latitude every year to make a change. So what if one year one club gets smaller than the other? You're using that filter, and that's what should be in there. The priority allocation allocation policy shall be as follows. 1, levels of user groups, or level of use by each group, scheduling of time for each group, ensuring there's fair and adequate distribution of prime time. And you've referenced it, that's the piece that needs to be in there, because then that guides you from now on forward. Those filters really should guide that. Because I feel uncomfortable all of a sudden saying you pass a policy that's going to be that way for every day. And if you ask me on what basis, Joelle said, Mary said, the policy should speak to that filter set and process that you use. And you described it perfectly. And I believe that's what should be in there. Am I making sense?
Yep, it does make sense.
So whatever process you use to come up with those priorities, that's what should be in there. So even when you sit and meet with the user groups, you're saying, you know what? Here's your number of time, here's your number of users, you guys get prime time, it's unfair to the Sunday group. So all those pieces, and here's what we're recommending in the schedule. Because we've jumped right to saying, here's the priority.
Yeah, just for my own sake, and just want to look for clarity. Within the 5.2, we specify those 5 areas. Do you just want us to add more context to those as to why, or do you want us to take those right out and put in some of the others?
What are the steps that you use to get to these lists?
Okay.
You can even put a preface under Summers, scope, whatever it is, or definition in your, like you have, these are the user groups you have. I would put special events as a definition, rec swimming as a definition, all of them fit up there, and these are the groups. And then your filter says frequency, use, allocation of prime time, all those pieces that you talked about to get to kind of where you're at. And even that in there, consultation with other facilities, we did that. All those steps that you went through. So the filter is there every year. So if someone says, I'm not being treated fairly, on what basis? The policy says your number, your low priority. Well, no, let's go back to the filter. And the filter is what the policy should be. These are the steps we go through to get to that. Is that it? Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent. Councilor Baker.
Your Worship, I know you've heard the story before from me. When the indoor pool was built, like the outdoor pool, it was built with community money, not city tax dollars completely. And there was many, many donations, and I don't have the records on the pool because I wasn't here, but I know that there was big fundraising projects and there was a lot of money donated by the public in general. And the late Glenn Wood was very instrumental in that pool. And it was for the community to use, not specific groups. I have grandkids that play hockey, and they want the ice 24/7, but too bad. You don't get it, you get it when whoever schedules it, that's when you play hockey. And I think we have to look at everybody and give them an opportunity. The biggest problem that I used to see from being at City Hall was new groups would decide on August 1st, they're gonna start a new hockey league. And they want an ice line that fall. And nobody had ever budgeted for it. We didn't have the ice, and yet we tried to accommodate everybody. And I don't know how you deal with that, because I don't even know when you do all your schedules for hockey. I just use hockey as a better example, because I understand it a little better. But if somebody walks in, oh, we want to play Broomlow, and we're going to have 10 teams, how do you accommodate those when you never ever had the ice in the first place? So do we get to the point where we say, no, we can't accommodate anymore? Or what do we do? I mean, there's only so much capacity, unless you want to go swimming at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, I just wonder how we do that.
This policy will set.
The new users and the donations have to be considered. So
They absolutely do, Councilor. I'll let the executive.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this policy will set a basis for other facilities and other types of recreation facilities coming forward. So this is step one. We see a massive need for it with the pool, and this will flow into our other recreational facilities, our field houses, our arenas and everything else.
there's only so much room.
So if you just, I want to make sure I'm not leading down a garden path, but if you look at your background, so what are the filters? Opportunities for recreational swimming during prime time hours is allocated appropriately. Prime time versus non-prime time hours, there's a balance. Ensuring public demand for all users is met. The issues as you've written them can be written in the statement where those are your filters that you use in that section.
So then how do you decide then, like what would you suggest for non-prime to prime time hours, who gets access to that time?
So part of how did you get there? Well, you went and checked with other facilities, so you would add that in there as well. You know, and referencing other user groups across the province. The one thing we didn't quite talk about, although I think Jonathan touched on it, is that how many students are in each group, or kids, users, right? And I think that needs to be taken into account as well. If you have a user group of 15 and another one's 30, you know what? You know, we are about maximizing it. And in the end, I think, you know, the reality is that, and I don't know when that time's going to come, but we'll need another pool. And this is a good problem. So, but I think, as you're saying, this filter is around those pieces, and you've identified them in there.
I have 2 questions, and both of them were answered, but I just wanted to bring them both up. I appreciate the special events, because that was one I wasn't sure about, but that was very clearly answered. The hours of operation, and you answered that, and I know it's not as simple as adding an hour a day, but has administration looked at what would adding an hour a day longer, would there be demand from some of those user groups to 10 p.m.? Because I think about other recreational facilities. I know swimming is unique, but it's not unique, because we have people playing using other facilities later at night. I know 6 is early, but again, same question. Has that conversation happened with user groups and different groups? And I know you folks manage it, so you'll be able to tell me if people want to get up at 5 in the morning to come play and swim rather than at 6.
Currently, we do have a user group that does book sometime in the early morning. A lot of these groups haven't gone that route yet. And that's one thing that we've seen, is that there's definitely times in the mornings, at the times that have been classified as non-prime times, that we could definitely change things. These groups have got it pretty good. They've got a lot of prime time booked, and this is kind of our way of trying to sort things out. And you're right, hockey groups, a lot of different groups do those early mornings and do not always have prime time. So that's one of those things we're trying to accomplish.
Excellent, yeah. Because I think we've got a facility that we're not going to run 24 hours a day, as Councilor Baker alluded to. It just won't happen. But if we can mix it up a little bit and stretch it out an hour if the staffing can accommodate. And again, back to you folks running your budget and your operation. With an hour longer on weekdays, not even Monday through Friday, would be something that might help. Just a suggestion, a thought that crossed my mind.
So just add one other thing, go ahead. My wife, when she wants to register for yoga classes, has to register online before you go. And if there aren't enough people for that class, it's not offered. So it might be able, if there are people who want to swim at 5 in the morning, and can they book online and say, I want to do a lap swim in the morning, so that you're able to make sure that you can allocate a personnel to be in there to open the building at 5. But I'm just thinking that we see some other strategies that are used in other sectors, certainly in, around squats, whatever, is that, no, we're not running a class of 1 today because there aren't enough people for that class, sorry, and it's canceled. So then they don't pay anybody to offer that time. So I'm just wondering if that might be something you can play with the pool as well. For those people who want to be early or whatever other times that are out there, right?
I think we've given you something to work with. Thank you very much for the presentation, Mary.
Thank you.
Please. Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item 5.8, draft privacy policy. I'd like the city manager to Chief Staff.
Thank you. We have before you today for council is the full Councilmember.
She'll be there. Both of you go ahead and start. They'll be walking in here momentarily. Councilor Buckingham has that. There she is. Perfect.
For council today for review and direction is the draft privacy policy that will be applicable to all employees, our volunteers, and members of council. Some background on this is that administration has drafted a policy to emphasize the importance of the privacy and confidentiality of personal information and to ensure we are compliant with Saskatchewan's Local Authority Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, also known as LA FOIA Act. Our objective for this draft policy is to provide structure and guidance for the protection of privacy and confidentiality of personal information. And we'd like to present the committee here today with 2 options. The first option is the committee to direct administration to bring the draft privacy policy forward to council for a decision. This will ensure that our policies continue to reflect best practices and are up to date. The second option today is for the committee to direct administration to make changes to the draft privacy policy and to bring it back for further discussion at a future GPC meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief of Staff. Any questions or comments?
Not sure. So, disposition of documents. So, yeah, because I always see it in the definitions, and one of the things that most organizations struggle with is, what the heck do I do with this information? I just can't keep adding another building with all these paper documents. So I don't know if we have a process in place by which we digitize or whatever, but within the FOIA it will say after X number of years, certain documents can legally be disposed of, whatever it is. So I'm just wondering why we don't have it in the definition. Is this the right place for it to be?
We can certainly add that. Our documents, anything related to our employees. And I'm not sure if our city clerk wants to reference that or what we have to do after a certain time frame once the employee is finished.
One of the new policies that we're bringing forward, Councilor, is the record retention policy.
Okay.
And that will speak to it.
Okay, that's why I just wanted to make sure. But so even though it might be in the definitions, it would be, I would just say to the front end. So if you're looking for it, look at that.
Absolutely.
Point people in that direction.
Anything else? Councilor Baker.
Your Worship, I'm not just sure the right time to talk about this, but certainly our Director Marie is familiar with this kind of thing. In my mind today, this has been a great day to do what we did, because there's so many things that are out there that need to be fine-tuned and updated on a regular basis. I don't know how often off the top of that wall, but it's good they're being done. But the one thing I would ask, and I don't know what my colleagues did on the weekend, but I spent all weekend trying to look up the old policies. And we changed things, and they're not italics, they aren't in italics, they're not underlined, or they're not in red. So we changed things, and I'm saying, well, what happened 3 years ago? And I've got to the point of saying, I just can't, I don't have enough time to do this. So we had about 10 or 12 draft bylaws today. And these are very important documents. These are probably the most important documents we have in the city, because it guides us. and they may be good for 5 years, they may be good 10, but they're a living document. And I would really appreciate if yourself and the city manager would look at this with the team and figure out a way to highlight what you're changing. Because you'll have a 50-page report and maybe only change 3 pages. And then maybe the other guys can speed read and you know all the answers, but I don't. And I'd really like to see us work on that somehow. I don't have the answer, but I can tell you from another world I lived in, when any kind of stationary documents, as you'd like to call these are pretty stationary, they were in red or underlined, or what changes were made were put in there. And then in the future, when we're gone, the next council, somebody can pull those out and bring them up and say, well, those are the changes they made in 2018, and now it's 2080, or whatever it was. And I think it's just a good management system, especially under the way we operate with bylaws. So if I'm out of line, I'm okay, but I'm just telling you, there was a lot of paper to try and figure out what was changed.
Point well taken. We'll take it. That will.
And on this one as well, for Councillor Baker's reference, is that this is a brand new privacy policy, so we don't currently have anything in place now. What we have is a confidentiality agreement that's signed by all of our employees and on file. But certainly we identified the need and wanted to have something with a lot more information in that, so we can, for providing for training and to ensure that our employees know that their information is protected, whether it's employee related or if it's a medical leave or any other type.
My apologies.
Yeah.
I'm talking to all 12 of them today, but not just, I don't know just who handles all that for the city manager, and I kind of thought you might have something here.
Okay. No, I think the point well taken, Councillor, and I think that that information, you'll see methodology without creating 600 or 800 pages of paper for you, because that is one of the challenges, but we'll see what we'll work through that.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that, because as you say, from the perspective not being absolutely up to date on the bylaws, I'm not, when a new bylaw comes forward or an amendment, we're not sure what's being amended. So we'll see if we can figure out a methodology that works with the technology we have, because that plays a part of it.
It may take a year to get there, but it doesn't
work out.
I will look at that.
Councilor Monroe?
I just want to make a note that I really do appreciate this privacy policy. I think with the day and age of social media and everything else that is out there, that we are an employer as well, so we really do need to be able to protect the information of all our employees, council, volunteers, anyone that has anything to do with the city. So I really appreciate the policy, and I think it's something that's definitely needs to be noted, and everything is outlined very well in it. So with all new hires or with everything, I think it's just really important even to circulate amongst current staff, so that we know that this policy is in place. But it's definitely, especially anybody with children or anybody at all, it's really important to have that privacy in place. So, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple questions. My first one was just, where does this policy, is it over and above what you would find in LA FOIP, or is it more or less just the same stuff that's in there?
It is over and above. Certainly LA FOIP was a lot of the information in this is referenced, but one of the things, Councillor Thorson, that we wanted to do was to emphasize our employees' internal information as well. And I'll give an example of an employee who's off on sick leave or medical leave, who's privy to that or who's to know why that employee is off. So we went over and above in the employee relations portion of that. But it is, it does go, there's a lot more information than what would be covered by it.
Okay, and that's what's important to me, because otherwise my opinion of this was, what's the point? If we already say within the charter we are following LA FOIP, then we just show people what that means and what our requirements are, and then you don't need the policy. But if we are going over and above the standard, then I think it's a good policy.
Absolutely, and certainly a tool that we'll use moving forward for training for all of our employees, and especially for our management team, is to make sure that they know that although there's an employee with the city, their information is confidential because they're a direct supervisor, but it's not privy to other supervisors or other managers or other employees. So that's one of the things that we emphasize in this policy as well.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, I know that certainly in the education environment, even though the LaFoip or FOIP in Alberta was there, you still were required to have a policy, in part because people did not read the act, they read your policy. And that was the context within it. Do we have to declare in here that you are the LA FOIP officer? Because you're referred to as the guy to have the complaint, and so I know that when we did it, I just can't remember if that was Alberta or Saskatchewan, but we had to designate someone as that LA FOIP officer.
So I am designated as the head of LA FOIP for the purpose of the city, but that designation could move through. It's just whoever's in charge of LA FOIP.
So I believe I'm ultimately responsible as the mayor, and I have designated the city clerk in this case to be the officer.
So I think we should have that in here as well, so it's clear as to who that person is. Because if you're reading the policy and want to have a complaint, it says in here to go see him as opposed to the mayor. And from, you can say the mayor may designate whoever it is as the blah, 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 and then the current designation is yada, yada, whatever, or something. But I would put the definition on the top too, so people know that that's the person you go to talk to.
Sorry, I just have a question now because of that. Does that confuse the issue then from an employee relations perspective if you're bringing things to the LA FOIP officer who is a city clerk rather than to human resources?
So around these issues, you go to the LA FOIP officer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Your Worship, it used to be Director Doug, and then Kurt Morrison was the alternate when he was here. Is that right? Okay. Thought it was.
But in regards to that, Council Thorson, it would only be if there was a breach.
Yeah.
Other than that, then the policy would go through.
Yeah.
So if there was a breach, it would come to the head of FOIP.
Breach or a request of information from that.
Which, even if there was a request, this would be exempt information.
Are you very clear on that?
That's good, thanks.
Okay.
Clear as mud.
Love LA FOIP. Thank you. Any other questions from Marie? Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 5.9, the Southgate Plaza redistricting. What's the city manager?
From our planning and development department, Natasha will present.
Good afternoon, Natasha. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm here to present the Southgate Plaza redistricting of Lot 37, Block 4, Plan 536 NY. The purpose of this proposed redistricting is to streamline the development permit process on the subject lands and to ensure an ease in the transition of businesses wishing to operate from the subject lands. Currently, when a new business comes in, they will require a DP. On the subject lands today, there is one 5-unit building and one 2-unit building. The minimum setbacks for these buildings do not conform to section 7.2.3 of development regulations outlined in the Land Use Bylaw 5/2016. However, if redistricting is approved, the footprints of these buildings would not be permitted to be altered at any time. The above-mentioned buildings offer leasing opportunities to potential businesses in Lloydminster. Due to the parcel being direct control, council approval is required on all development permit applications prior to business occurring. Recently, a new tenant came in to obtain a DP, and administration expedited a DP, and it was brought to council for approval. Generally, this process would take 6 to 8 weeks. Until approval is granted, the applicant would not be able to operate at this location. The proposed redistricting of the lands would streamline future processes and ease the transition of buildings into the space. If this proposed redistricting goes forward, administration would have the authority to approve all DPs. Following the DP on this land, the landowner brought forward a redistricting. This redistricting is compatible with adjacent land uses, as you can see on the map. Lands to the north are C2 and DC2. Lands to the west and south are C2. This proposed redistricting is also compatible with Section 12.2, which is our highway corridor overlay. In January, administration went through a review in which we touched base with agencies. No concerns were brought forward at this time. Council has any questions, I'm happy to address.
Questions or comments? Councilor Thorson.
I just want to make sure I'm not crazy. We have seen this one before, have we not? This is where Panago is?
I don't know if Panago's in this. It's in this lot. There's
Okay.
2 buildings on the lot. It was a recent DP that was brought forward for discretionary use for retail sales
Right.
that council recently sought.
Right.
And since the land exists today as or DC2 direct control, that development permit had to be brought to council for approval, and we're trying to take, on this lot in particular, that administration can approve it.
Okay. Yeah. I wish it makes sense that it should have been that in the first place, and maybe when we did our highway corridor thing that we ought to have caught it or whatever the case is, but
There is no
regardless.
reason that this lot in particular was DC2.
Yeah, sounds like it's fine.
So-
I thought we heard though that it was because of the parking and the access around the building was a little awkward as well.
I think it was hypothetical.
If we could, there was some discussion, I think that's what relates back to in the information provided, Tasha. It does say that you can't, the landowner won't be able to change anything because we're out of conform. We're not conforming to the bylaw, but it was built at the time based on the bylaw changed, now if they want to rezone. But the landowner, and I guess, or the property owner is fully aware
He
that
brought forward this
he brought forward, that he understands really clearly that he can't come back and look for an exception to, oh, I want to add on to my building or something like that. As long as that message has been transmitted
Yes.
clearly to him or her or them.
Yes. In essence, these buildings on this lot will be grandfathered in as they exist today, and no changes will be permitted.
So I think that it would help clean this up because again, I can certainly understand we've hindered, the process would hinder development in our community. And from that perspective, Councilor Baker.
Your worship, at one time, all those highways were highway commercial. And every time they wanted to do something, you had to rezone or do something. So I remember our city manager at the time, Roger Brecko, said, we gotta turn this into direct control. Because highway commercial would allow hotels, gas stations, and restaurants, and I don't know what at that time. So it just evolved, really.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. I think also in 2016, 2017, after our new bylaw was in place, administration kind of went through the highway and picked out the direct control, and gave them the appropriate commercial district. Unfortunately, clearly some of them were missed, and I could probably say there are still some out there today, and that is on our radar in the near future to kind of go through and pull out some of those that are direct control that don't need to be direct control.
Highway capacity was a big thing on entrance side street capacity.
Any other comments, Council? I think you've got a winner here. Thank you very much, Natasha. We'll look forward to seeing it coming back to Council.
Thank you.
That brings to the end of reports. We'll ask if there's any inquiries from the media.
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, there are requests for yourself, Mayor Alvarez, as well as Councilors Diachuk, Buckingham, and Morrison.
Thank you. I'll look to Council for a short for adjournment.
Motion for inside recess.
Yes, thank you. Seconded. Councilor Buckingham, all in favor? Opposed, carried.